Welcome to Moonlit Romance Library. Please follow for more stories. Seraphine Bramblevine had spent 17 years protecting Prince Lucivar Nightcrown's beautiful face, and it took him less than 17 seconds to pretend none of it had mattered. The Hall of 12 Moons was full when he rejected her. Every alpha family in the kingdom stood beneath the silver arches. Noble women wore heavy velvet gowns embroidered with pack crests. Warriors in formal armor lined the walls. At the far end of the hall, the empty black throne of the Alpha King waited beneath a crown carved from moonstone. His younger brother stood on the lower dais in white and gold, handsome enough to make half the court forgive him before he had even committed the offense. Seraphine had always loved that face. When they were children, Lucivar's fine bones and long gold-brown hair had made him look too delicate for the wrestling yard. Other boys had noticed. They had pushed him into mud, taken his boots, and called him a lamb born in a wolf's den. Seraphine, already stronger than boys twice her age, had put all three tormentors into a horse trough and asked Lucivar whether his nose had been damaged. He had stared at her with wet gray eyes and said no. "Good," she had told him. "I like your nose." For years after that, she had stood between him and every fist, insult, and cruel joke. When he grew taller and learned to fight, she trained with him. When his first shift left him feverish, she carried him 3 miles through snow to the healers. When he was afraid to speak before the Southern Pack Council, she sat in the first row and smiled until he remembered every word. She had pursued him openly. She had given him crooked protective charms and praised his hair with an honesty that made him blush. He had accepted her attention, held her hand in private, and once promised that no one would ever make her stand alone in a crowded hall. Now he stood in that very hall and looked through her as if she were an inconvenient pillar. "Lady Seraphine," Lucivar said, loud enough for every noble to hear, "there has been an unfortunate misunderstanding. I have never made a formal mating vow to you." A ripple of whispers crossed the chamber. Seraphine's right hand tightened around the small velvet box she had brought as a gift. Inside it rested the first magic sphere she had ever kept stable for more than a minute. It was no larger than a plum, silver blue and dense enough to crack a stone floor if she lost control. She had practiced for 6 months because she wanted to show Lucivar that her mother's explanation had been true. Her magic was not absent, it was compressed. Lucivar knew that. He had heard her mother explain it when they were children. He had watched Seraphine rise before dawn to train, watched wands split in her grip, watched spells collapse into heavy little balls that rolled through classrooms and shattered furniture. He had told her he believed her. Today, beside him stood Caldrissa Valahart, a highborn witch whose flame magic could fill a ballroom ceiling with golden birds. Caldrissa was lovely in a dark red gown, but her mouth was tense. She did not look at Seraphine. Lucivar continued. "The Southern Territories require a Luna whose magic is already proven. Lady Caldrissa has agreed to stand beside me." Someone near the musicians laughed. "Proven," an older noblewoman repeated. "A practical requirement. One cannot lift a curse by lifting the table." More laughter followed. Seraphine heard the words clearly. She also heard the faint crack inside the velvet box as her magic sphere grew heavier. She had explained herself for years. She had explained that her mother, Mevrian Bramblevane, had never lied about her potential. She had explained that dense magic matured differently. She had explained that strength was not a shameful substitute for witchcraft, but another gift entirely. No one who mocked her had ever wanted an explanation, so she did not give one. "Return the pearl clasp," Lucivar said. His voice lowered, as if gentleness could make the demand less public. "It belonged to my grandmother." Seraphine touched the clasp at her collar. He had fastened it there 2 winters ago after kissing her forehead beneath the old bell tower. He had said it suited the woman who would one day wear his colors. Her chest hurt, not theatrically, not in a way that could be answered with a clever sentence. It hurt with the quiet weight of every morning she had believed they were walking toward the same future. She removed the clasp and crossed the polished floor. Lucivar held out his palm. She set the pearl into it. "You are correct," she said. "You never made a formal mating vow." Relief touched his handsome face too quickly. Seraphine looked at him and remembered a thin boy hiding behind her shoulder. She remembered his hand in hers. She remembered how many times she had defended his courage before he had found it for himself. "But when Lord Petavar put you in a feed barrel at 13, she added, "you promised never to let anyone humiliate me in public." A few people stopped smiling. Lucivar's face tightened. "This is not the time for childhood stories." "No," Seraphine agreed. "Your memory is not as pretty as your face. I should have noticed sooner." The first genuine laugh came from one of the guards. He turned it into a cough when Lucivar glared at him. Seraphine closed the velvet box, slipped it into her pocket, and stepped toward the ceremonial chair on which Lucivar had been sitting before the announcement. It was an absurd object, built from black oak and plated with silver wolves. Her mother had reinforced its legs after Lucivar cracked it during his first uncontrolled shift. Lucivar frowned. "What are you doing?" "Returning another family possession." She grasped the chair beneath both arms. Lucivar had time to look confused before Seraphine lifted the entire chair with him still in it. The Hall of 12 Moons fell silent. She raised him high enough that his boots swung above the floor, turned carefully, and carried him down the center aisle. Lucivar grabbed the carved arms. "Seraphine, put me down." "I intend to." Inside the hall. That detail was not specified. The nearest courtiers scattered. One elderly matron clutched her jeweled cane and laughed so hard she had to lean on a column. Caldrissa covered her mouth. Seraphine could not tell whether she was shocked or trying not to smile. At the open bronze doors, Seraphine set the chair on the outer landing with perfect care. Lucivar remained seated, red-faced and speechless. "Since you do not require my future," she said, "you probably do not require my mother's reinforced furniture either." A low voice behind her said, "Leave the chair, bring the woman back." The command did not need to be loud. Every wolf in the hall felt it. Seraphine turned. The Alpha King had entered through the northern doors without fanfare. Valar Nightcrown wore black silver armor beneath a heavy winter cloak. No skin showed below his throat. His dark hair brushed the collar of his armor, and a thin scar crossed one eyebrow without diminishing the severe balance of his face. He was broader than Lucivar, taller than any man near him, and carried the contained stillness of someone who had never needed to perform strength for a room. Seraphine's grief did something deeply disrespectful. It paused. Her gaze moved from his face to the armored line of his shoulders, then returned to his face because she had standards and intended to examine the better feature twice. Valar stopped 3 paces away. His eyes were a cold, unusual blue. They met hers directly. "Have you finished looking?" he asked. Seraphine considered lying. Her mother had raised her better. "No, Your Majesty, but this appears to be a formal moment, so I can continue later." A shocked sound moved through the court. The king's mouth did not smile, exactly. One corner merely reconsidered its position. He looked past her to Lucivar on the landing. "You received her loyalty for 17 years. Lucivar rose from the chair. "Brother, I can explain. That privilege was available before you invited 12 packs to watch you disgrace her. The Southern Council requires a proven Luna." Valar's gaze returned to Seraphine. "Did you ask her to prove herself today?" Lucivar hesitated. Seraphine answered for him. "No, he asked for his grandmother's clasp." "Efficient," Valar said. "Cowardly, but efficient." Lucivar's jaw hardened. "You have been away at war. You do not understand the pressure here." "I understand pressure. It is the thing that reveals structure. You appear decorative." The guard who had coughed before abruptly studied the ceiling. Valar removed his winter cloak. The heavy black fabric was lined in silver, and fastened with the royal wolf crown. He placed it around Seraphine's shoulders. It smelled of cold air, cedar, and the iron halls of the northern fortress. The gesture was protective, but not possessive. He did not touch her throat or pull her against him. He simply made it impossible for anyone in the room to pretend she stood alone. "She has explained her magic for years," Valor said to the court. "You chose not to believe her. That is a failure of your judgment, not of her truth." Seraphine looked up at him. He was even more unfair from this distance. Without turning, he murmured, "Now is still not the time to inspect me." "You are standing very close," she murmured back. "I am being challenged by circumstances." This time she saw the brief movement at the corner of his mouth. Then he faced the hall. "Lucivar has rejected Lady Seraphine Bramblevane. He is free to live with that decision." Caldrissa finally looked at Seraphine. There was relief in her expression, but also shame. Valor's voice deepened. "I claim her under the crown's right of open choice, not as property, not as consolation, as the woman I intend to court before every pack that mocked her." The words struck the hall harder than a roar. Lucivar went pale. Seraphine stared at the king. "You intend to court me?" "Yes." "Because I carried your brother outside?" That improved the morning. It did not create my interest. "How long have you been interested?" "This is still a formal moment." She narrowed her eyes. "Convenient. You may interrogate me later." On the outer landing, Lucivar took one step toward them. "Seraphine, do not turn this into revenge." She looked at the man she had loved. The pain returned. It did not disappear because his brother was more handsome. Her heart was not a plate one could replace with a better plate. She had dreamed of Lucivar's hand in hers at this ceremony. She had believed he would be proud of her even before her magic awakened. But when she looked at him now, she also saw what he had chosen. Applause from people who had never carried him through snow, approval from nobles who had laughed when he was weak, and the comfort of a woman whose talents required no courage to defend. "I am not doing anything for revenge," Seraphine said. "For the first time today, I am considering something for myself." Valor extended his hand. He did not command her to take it. She studied his gauntleted fingers, then his face, then his shoulders again, because emotional injury had not made her blind. "If I accept your courtship," she said, "I am not agreeing to become queen." "Correct. I will continue training. I would be disappointed if you stopped. And if someone insults my mother, I may fight them. Warn the floor stewards first. They have requested fewer broken tables." Mevrienne Bramblevane's voice came from the rear of the hall. "She only broke 3 last year." Seraphine's mother walked between the nobles in a dark blue high-collared gown, her silver-streaked hair braided down her back. She was not tall, but the court made space for her as if she carried a storm beneath her skin. Mevrienne stopped beside her daughter and examined Lucivar outside with his displaced chair. "You did not strike his face?" she asked. "It was a formal occasion." "Excellent restraint." Then Mevrienne looked at Valor. "My daughter is not a prize you won by arriving at the correct dramatic moment." "I know. She has loved your brother." Valor's expression did not change, but a colder light entered his eyes. "I know that too. She may continue to grieve him even while she finds you attractive." Seraphine closed her eyes. "Mother." "You were staring." "I was wounded." "Not in the eyes." A laugh escaped Caldrissa before she could stop it. Mevrienne turned toward the sound. Caldrissa straightened, expecting rebuke. Instead, the older witch said, "At least one person beside my daughter is honest today." Valor kept his hand extended. Seraphine placed hers in it. His gauntlet was cool. His grip was careful, far gentler than a man of his size needed to be. For one heartbeat, his thumb moved over her knuckles, a quiet touch hidden by the folds of his cloak. The court saw a king claim a rejected witch. Seraphine felt something more dangerous. He was not rescuing her from humiliation. She had already carried the humiliation outside on its own chair. He was choosing to stand beside her after seeing exactly what she was capable of. "Very well," she said. "You may court me." Valor inclined his head. "Generous. Do not become smug. I have been king for 11 years. Smugness is included in the crown." She looked at his face again. "That explains why it suits you." Behind them, Lucivar said her name. Seraphine did not turn. Her heart hurt, her eyes burned. She would probably cry later in a private room, then find something heavy to lift until breathing became easy again. But she walked back into the hall with the Alpha King at her side, her mother's hand warm against her back, and every person who had mocked her forced to move out of her path. The king's cloak trailed behind her like a piece of night that had decided to become a banner. The first object Seraphine broke after her rejection was not a chair, a door, or Lucivar's perfect nose. It was the court's certainty that she would leave quietly. The second object was a banquet table. That happened 3 hours later. Valor ordered the court luncheon to proceed, partly because 12 Alpha families had traveled for the ceremony, and partly because, as he informed Seraphine, "If I cancel the meal, they will think your temper frightened me." Did it? No, it interested me. That is not necessarily healthier. Kings are rarely selected for health. Seraphine sat at his right beneath the black throne. Her mother sat on her other side, calmly eating roast roots while every noble in the room pretended not to stare. Lucivar occupied a place 3 tables away. Caldrissa sat beside him but kept a careful distance. Neither spoke much. The small velvet box remained in Seraphine's pocket. Its weight increased with every glance she felt from the room. Mevrian noticed the pull of the fabric. "Your sphere is responding to distress." "I am not distressed." Welcome to Moonlit Romance Library. Please follow for more stories. Seraphine Bramblevine had spent 17 years protecting Prince Lucivar Nightcrown's beautiful face, and it took him less than 17 seconds to pretend none of it had mattered. The Hall of 12 Moons was full when he rejected her. Every Alpha family in the kingdom stood beneath the silver arches. Noble women wore heavy velvet gowns embroidered with pack crests. Warriors in formal armor lined the walls. At the far end of the hall, the empty black throne of the Alpha King waited beneath a crown carved from moonstone. His younger brother stood on the lower dais in white and gold, handsome enough to make half the court forgive him before he had even committed the offense. Seraphine had always loved that face. When they were children, Lucivar's fine bones and long gold-brown hair had made him look too delicate for the wrestling yard. Other boys had noticed. They had pushed him into mud, taken his boots, and called him a lamb born in a wolf's den. Seraphine, already stronger than boys twice her age, had put all 3 tormentors into a horse trough and asked Lucivar whether his nose had been damaged. He had stared at her with wet gray eyes and said no. "Good," she had told him. "I like your nose." For years after that, she had stood between him and every fist, insult, and cruel joke. When he grew taller and learned to fight, she trained with him. When his first shift left him feverish, she carried him 3 miles through snow to the healers. When he was afraid to speak before the Southern Pack Council, she sat in the first row and smiled until he remembered every word. She had pursued him openly. She had given him crooked protective charms and praised his hair with an honesty that made him blush. He had accepted her attention, held her hand in private, and once promised that no one would ever make her stand alone in a crowded hall. Now he stood in that very hall and looked through her as if she were an inconvenient pillar. "Lady Seraphine," Lucivar said, loud enough for every noble to hear, "there has been an unfortunate misunderstanding. I have never made a formal mating vow to you." A ripple of whispers crossed the chamber. Seraphine's right hand tightened around the small velvet box she had brought as a gift. Inside it rested the first magic sphere she had ever kept stable for more than a minute. It was no larger than a plum, silver blue and dense enough to crack a stone floor if she lost control. She had practiced for 6 months because she wanted to show Lucivar that her mother's explanation had been true. Her magic was not absent, it was compressed. Lucivar knew that. He had heard her mother explain it when they were children. He had watched Seraphine rise before dawn to train, watched wands split in her grip, watched spells collapse into heavy little balls that rolled through classrooms and shattered furniture. He had told her he believed her. Today, beside him stood Caldrissa Valahart, a highborn witch whose flame magic could fill a ballroom ceiling with golden birds. Caldrissa was lovely in a dark red gown, but her mouth was tense. She did not look at Seraphine. Lucivar continued. The Southern Territories require a Luna whose magic is already proven. Lady Caldrissa has agreed to stand beside me. Someone near the musicians laughed. Proven, an older noblewoman repeated. A practical requirement. One cannot lift a curse by lifting the table. More laughter followed. Seraphine heard the words clearly. She also heard the faint crack inside the velvet box as her magic sphere grew heavier. She had explained herself for years. She had explained that her mother, Mevrian Bramblevain, had never lied about her potential. She had explained that dense magic matured differently. She had explained that strength was not a shameful substitute for witchcraft, but another gift entirely. No one who mocked her had ever wanted an explanation, so she did not give one. Return the pearl clasp, Lucivar said. His voice lowered, as if gentleness could make the demand less public. It belonged to my grandmother. Seraphine touched the clasp at her collar. He had fastened it there 2 winters ago after kissing her forehead beneath the old bell tower. He had said it suited the woman who would one day wear his colors. Her chest hurt, not theatrically, not in a way that could be answered with a clever sentence. It hurt with the quiet weight of every morning she had believed they were walking toward the same future. She removed the clasp and crossed the polished floor. Lucivar held out his palm. She set the pearl into it. You are correct, she said. You never made a formal mating vow. Relief touched his handsome face too quickly. Seraphine looked at him and remembered a thin boy hiding behind her shoulder. She remembered his hand in hers. She remembered how many times she had defended his courage before he had found it for himself. But when Lord Petavar put you in a feed barrel at 13, she added, you promised never to let anyone humiliate me in public. A few people stopped smiling. Lucivar's face tightened. This is not the time for childhood stories. No, Seraphine agreed. Your memory is not as pretty as your face. I should have noticed sooner. The first genuine laugh came from one of the guards. He turned it into a cough when Lucivar glared at him. Seraphine closed the velvet box, slipped it into her pocket, and stepped toward the ceremonial chair on which Lucivar had been sitting before the announcement. It was an absurd object, built from black oak and plated with silver wolves. Her mother had reinforced its legs after Lucivar cracked it during his first uncontrolled shift. Lucivar frowned. What are you doing? Returning another family possession. She grasped the chair beneath both arms. Lucivar had time to look confused before Seraphine lifted the entire chair with him still in it. The Hall of 12 Moons fell silent. She raised him high enough that his boots swung above the floor, turned carefully, and carried him down the center aisle. Lucivar grabbed the carved arms. Seraphine, put me down. I intend to. Inside the hall. That detail was not specified. The nearest courtiers scattered. One elderly matron clutched her jeweled cane and laughed so hard she had to lean on a column. Caldrissa covered her mouth. Seraphine could not tell whether she was shocked or trying not to smile. At the open bronze doors, Seraphine set the chair on the outer landing with perfect care. Lucivar remained seated, red-faced and speechless. Since you do not require my future, she said, you probably do not require my mother's reinforced furniture either. A low voice behind her said, "Leave the chair, bring the woman back." The command did not need to be loud. Every wolf in the hall felt it. Seraphine turned. The Alpha King had entered through the northern doors without fanfare. Valar Nightcrown wore black silver armor beneath a heavy winter cloak. No skin showed below his throat. His dark hair brushed the collar of his armor, and a thin scar crossed one eyebrow without diminishing the severe balance of his face. He was broader than Lucivar, taller than any man near him, and carried the contained stillness of someone who had never needed to perform strength for a room. Seraphine's grief did something deeply disrespectful. It paused. Her gaze moved from his face to the armored line of his shoulders, then returned to his face because she had standards and intended to examine the better feature twice. Valar stopped 3 paces away. His eyes were a cold, unusual blue. They met hers directly. "Have you finished looking?" he asked. Seraphine considered lying. Her mother had raised her better. "No, Your Majesty, but this appears to be a formal moment, so I can continue later." A shocked sound moved through the court. The king's mouth did not smile, exactly. One corner merely reconsidered its position. He looked past her to Lucivar on the landing. "You received her loyalty for 17 years. Lucivar rose from the chair. "Brother, I can explain. That privilege was available before you invited 12 packs to watch you disgrace her. The Southern Council requires a proven Luna." Valar's gaze returned to Seraphine. "Did you ask her to prove herself today?" Lucivar hesitated. Seraphine answered for him. "No, he asked for his grandmother's clasp." "Efficient," Valar said. "Cowardly, but efficient." Lucivar's jaw hardened. "You have been away at war. You do not understand the pressure here." "I understand pressure. It is the thing that reveals structure. You appear decorative." The guard who had coughed before abruptly studied the ceiling. Valar removed his winter cloak. The heavy black fabric was lined in silver and fastened with the royal wolf crown. He placed it around Seraphine's shoulders. It smelled of cold air, cedar, and the iron halls of the northern fortress. The gesture was protective, but not possessive. He did not touch her throat or pull her against him. He simply made it impossible for anyone in the room to pretend she stood alone. "She has explained her magic for years," Valar said to the court. "You chose not to believe her. That is a failure of your judgment, not of her truth." Seraphine looked up at him. He was even more unfair from this distance. Without turning, he murmured, "Now is still not the time to inspect me." "You are standing very close," she murmured back. "I am being challenged by circumstances." This time she saw the brief movement at the corner of his mouth. Then he faced the hall. "Lucivar has rejected Lady Seraphine Bramblevain. He is free to live with that decision." Caldrissa finally looked at Seraphine. There was relief in her expression, but also shame. Valar's voice deepened. "I claim her under the crown's right of open choice, not as property, not as consolation, as the woman I intend to court before every pack that mocked her." The words struck the hall harder than a roar. Lucivar went pale. Seraphine stared at the king. "You intend to court me?" "Yes." "Because I carried your brother outside?" That improved the morning. It did not create my interest. "How long have you been interested?" "This is still a formal moment." She narrowed her eyes. "Convenient. You may interrogate me later." On the outer landing, Lucivar took one step toward them. "Seraphine, do not turn this into revenge." She looked at the man she had loved. The pain returned. It did not disappear because his brother was more handsome. Her heart was not a plate one could replace with a better plate. She had dreamed of Lucivar's hand in hers at this ceremony. She had believed he would be proud of her even before her magic awakened. But when she looked at him now, she also saw what he had chosen. Applause from people who had never carried him through snow, approval from nobles who had laughed when he was weak, and the comfort of a woman whose talents required no courage to defend. "I am not doing anything for revenge," Seraphine said. "For the first time today, I am considering something for myself." Valor extended his hand. He did not command her to take it. She studied his gauntleted fingers, then his face, then his shoulders again, because emotional injury had not made her blind. "If I accept your courtship," she said, "I am not agreeing to become queen." "Correct. I will continue training. I would be disappointed if you stopped. And if someone insults my mother, I may fight them. Warn the floor stewards first. They have requested fewer broken tables." Mevrienne Bramblevain's voice came from the rear of the hall. "She only broke 3 last year." Seraphine's mother walked between the nobles in a dark blue high-collared gown, her silver-streaked hair braided down her back. She was not tall, but the court made space for her as if she carried a storm beneath her skin. Mevrienne stopped beside her daughter and examined Lucivar outside with his displaced chair. "You did not strike his face?" she asked. "It was a formal occasion." "Excellent restraint." Then Mevrienne looked at Valor. "My daughter is not a prize you won by arriving at the correct dramatic moment." "I know. She has loved your brother." Valor's expression did not change, but a colder light entered his eyes. "I know that too. She may continue to grieve him even while she finds you attractive." Seraphine closed her eyes. "Mother." "You were staring." "I was wounded." "Not in the eyes." A laugh escaped Caldrissa before she could stop it. Mevrienne turned toward the sound. Caldrissa straightened, expecting rebuke. Instead, the older witch said, "At least one person beside my daughter is honest today." Valor kept his hand extended. Seraphine placed hers in it. His gauntlet was cool. His grip was careful, far gentler than a man of his size needed to be. For one heartbeat, his thumb moved over her knuckles, a quiet touch hidden by the folds of his cloak. The court saw a king claim a rejected witch. Seraphine felt something more dangerous. He was not rescuing her from humiliation. She had already carried the humiliation outside on its own chair. He was choosing to stand beside her after seeing exactly what she was capable of. "Very well," she said. "You may court me." Valor inclined his head. "Generous. Do not become smug. I have been king for 11 years. Smugness is included in the crown." She looked at his face again. "That explains why it suits you." Behind them, Lucivar said her name. Seraphine did not turn. Her heart hurt, her eyes burned. She would probably cry later in a private room, then find something heavy to lift until breathing became easy again. But she walked back into the hall with the Alpha King at her side, her mother's hand warm against her back, and every person who had mocked her forced to move out of her path. The king's cloak trailed behind her like a piece of night that had decided to become a banner. The first object Seraphine broke after her rejection was not a chair, a door, or Lucivar's perfect nose. It was the court's certainty that she would leave quietly. The second object was a banquet table. That happened 3 hours later. Valor ordered the court luncheon to proceed, partly because 12 Alpha families had traveled for the ceremony, and partly because, as he informed Seraphine, "If I cancel the meal, they will think your temper frightened me." Did it? No, it interested me. That is not necessarily healthier. Kings are rarely selected for health. Seraphine sat at his right beneath the black throne. Her mother sat on her other side, calmly eating roast roots while every noble in the room pretended not to stare. Lucivar occupied a place 3 tables away. Caldrissa sat beside him but kept a careful distance, neither spoke much. The small velvet box remained in Seraphine's pocket. Its weight increased with every glance she felt from the room. Mevrienne noticed the pull of the fabric. "Your sphere is responding to distress." "I am not distressed." The bench is bending beneath your pocket. Seraphine looked down. The carved wood had begun to bow. Valor leaned closer. Is that the gift you brought for my brother? It was. May I see it? She hesitated. It is not impressive. Neither is half this court, yet they presented themselves freely. Seraphine drew out the box and placed it on the table. The wood gave a low creak. She opened the lid. The sphere glowed with pale moonlight. It was smooth, almost translucent, with threads of darker silver turning slowly inside. Beautiful, Seraphine thought, if one ignored that it weighed more than a suit of armor and had cracked the base of the box. Valor did not laugh. He removed one gauntlet and held his hand near it without touching. It is pulling ambient magic toward itself. Mevrian nodded. That is what I have tried to explain to the Coven Council. Seraphine does not fail to release magic. She condenses too much of it before release. At the neighboring table, a council witch whispered, a convenient theory. Seraphine heard. She always heard. She reached for the sphere, intending to return it to the box. It jumped. Valor moved at the same instant. The sphere rolled across the table. Plates, goblets, and a silver gravy vessel slid after it as though the sphere had become a tiny moon with its own gravity. Seraphine lunged. Valor caught her around the waist before she pitched over the table, while his bare hand closed around the sphere. The table split down the middle. Everything on it slid into the laps of 6 dignitaries. For one suspended moment, no one spoke. The Alpha of the Eastern Marshes stared at a roasted onion resting in his ceremonial hood. Mevrian set down her fork. 4 tables this year. Seraphine was still held against Valor's armored chest. His arm was firm around her middle, supporting her without effort. She could feel the rise of his breath through layers of clothing and metal. He looked down at the sphere in his palm. Heavy, he observed. Seraphine looked up at his face. You are also heavy. I did not announce it to the room. You have not lifted me yet. Give me time. His eyes sharpened with amusement. Only then did Seraphine realize the hall had gone silent for a second reason. The king's arm remained around her waist. She cleared her throat. You can release me. You are standing on a broken table support. I can balance. I know. He did not release her until a servant moved the splintered wood. The delay was practical. The slight pressure of his hand before he let go was not. Lucivar had risen from his seat. Seraphine, are you hurt? The question came too late and too familiarly. She turned toward him. No. His gaze moved to Valor's bare hand around the sphere. That object could be dangerous. So could the woman who made it, Valor said. You were comfortable with both when they served you. Lucivar flinched. Caldrissa stared at her plate. Valor placed the sphere on the stone floor rather than another table. It settled without damage, humming faintly. The Crown's wardmasters will study this with Lady Seraphine's permission, he said. Not to determine whether her power exists. That has become obvious. We will determine how it works. The council witch who had whispered before lifted her chin. Your Majesty, a heavy light is not necessarily useful magic. Seraphine's mother inhaled. Seraphine touched her sleeve. I can manage this one. She faced the woman. You are correct. Weight alone is not useful. The witch looked pleased. Seraphine continued. That is why I have never thrown you. The Eastern Alpha choked on his drink. The roasted onion fell from his hood. Valor picked up his goblet from the wreckage and raised it toward Seraphine, a model of restraint. She accepted the compliment with dignity. The luncheon resumed around the broken table. Servants brought a replacement bench reinforced with iron. Seraphine ate little, but the ache in her chest changed. It was still grief. It was also anger, embarrassment, and a strange, unwelcome relief. Lucivar had ended the future she thought she wanted. Valor had not offered a replacement future. He had offered public courtship, investigation of her magic, and a place at his side from which she could choose. That difference frightened her more than a command would have. After the meal, Mevrian took Seraphine to a quiet chamber overlooking the inner courtyard. The moment the door closed, Seraphine leaned against it and covered her face. Her mother did not tell her not to cry. She simply sat on the window bench and waited. "I believed him," Seraphine said at last. "I know. I thought he was afraid to make the announcement because of the council. I did not think the announcement would be called Drissa. I know. I carried him through a blizzard. You remind him of that every winter. Because it was difficult. He was surprisingly dense for someone so narrow." Mevrian's mouth softened. "Grief does not become foolish merely because the man who caused it behaved foolishly. You loved him. Mourn honestly." Seraphine lowered her hands. "The king is extremely handsome." "Also true. Is it disloyal to be heartbroken and notice that?" "No. Eyes are not marriage vows." Seraphine sat beside her. "Lucivar was my first love." "Yes. What if I only like Valor because he embarrassed Lucivar?" "Then you will discover that before making promises. That is the purpose of courtship." A knock sounded. Valor entered only after Mavrian granted permission. He had removed his armor and wore a high-collared black tunic beneath a fitted ceremonial coat. Seraphine's grief paused again, this time with less dignity. The king noticed. "I can return with uglier clothing," he said. "Do you own any?" "No, the crown forbids it." "Maëvrienne Rose, I suddenly remember an urgent matter elsewhere." "Mother, you are both adults. The door will remain open and 3 guards are outside. Try not to damage the architecture." She left. Valor remained near the door. "I did not come to demand gratitude." "Good. I would have lifted you out." "I considered that possibility." He held out the velvet box. The sphere rested inside, now cushioned by a folded square of royal chainmail. "The wardmaster confirmed your mother's observation," he said. "The sphere contains more compressed magic than 3 ordinary battle wards. It is unstable because every teacher has trained you to release power in lines. Your magic forms around a center." Seraphine took the box with both hands. "You believe that after one examination?" "I believed Mevrian before the examination. This provided measurements for people who require numbers before courage." She looked down at the glow. "Lucivar heard the same explanation years ago," she said. Valor's voice was controlled. "My brother often believes whatever permits him to avoid a difficult choice." "You dislike him?" "I love him. Those conditions can coexist." That answer reached her more deeply than praise would have. She closed the box. "Why did you claim me?" "Because leaving you alone in that hall would have been unjust." "That explains protection, not courtship." "No." "Then answer the second part." Valor studied her for several breaths. "When I was 19, I visited the southern court without royal colors. I watched a girl throw 3 noble children into a fountain because they insulted a boy with a pretty face." Seraphine stared. "You saw that?" "I also saw your mother defend your right to protect yourself while requiring you to repair the fountain. It was an expensive fountain. You rebuilt half of it alone. The masons were slow. You were 11. She shifted on the bench. "You remembered me because I broke masonry?" "I remembered you because everyone else in that courtyard changed their behavior according to rank. You did not." "I changed it according to faces. Lucivar was beautiful." "I am aware." The chill in his voice was so slight she almost missed it. Seraphine looked at him with new interest. "Are you jealous of your brother's face?" "No." "That was very quick." "Because the answer is simple. You are jealous. Valor stepped closer and lowered his voice. Lady Seraphine, you have looked at me more in 3 hours than you looked at him during the entire rejection. I am managing my envy. Heat rose into her cheeks. That is because you are new. A devastating explanation. Also larger. Better. She laughed before she could stop herself. The sound startled her. She had expected the whole day to remain broken. Valor did not look triumphant. He looked relieved. That expression made her wary in a different way. You truly remembered me, she said. Yes. For how long? Long enough that I knew your name before you lifted my brother. And you never approached me? You were pursuing him. I do not steal choices from women, even when I dislike their choices. Seraphine held his gaze. For the first time since Lucivar's announcement, she felt the shape of her own decision rather than the absence of his. Then court me, she said, slowly. Valor bowed his head. As slowly as you require. And do not use the crown to frighten away every man who speaks to me. I would never misuse royal authority. That answer was suspicious. I may give them administrative work. Vylor. It was the first time she used his name. His eyes changed, the cold blue warming for one brief instant. Seraphine, he answered. The open door, the guards, and the whole stone castle remained exactly where they had been. Still, the room felt smaller. He offered his hand again, this time without an audience. She placed hers in it. The wardmaster expects us below, he said. He believes your sphere may be connected to the weakening moon wards along the northern roads. Us? Your magic, your decision, your investigation. I will provide access and protection. And your face? Unfortunately, it accompanies me everywhere. She rose. I will endure it. They walked from the chamber side by side. Seraphine was still heartbroken. She was also curious. Her mother had always told her that two truths could exist in the same body without destroying each other. Strength and gentleness. Anger and restraint, grief and appetite for life. Apparently grief and an excellent view of the Alpha King's shoulders could coexist as well. The royal ward chamber lay beneath the oldest tower, where 12 black pillars carried silver lines into the bedrock. Seraphine had visited the upper court many times, usually to deliver messages for her mother or to retrieve Lucivar after a council meeting, but she had never been permitted below the third stair. Now Valor led her through 7 locked doors. The guards bowed to him and stared at her. She stared back until one young guard nearly walked into a wall. You enjoy making them nervous, Valor observed. Only when they begin it. He looked at you because you carried a prince outside. Then he should look with professional admiration. I will revise the guard handbook. At the lowest level, Wardmaster Dovrin Quill waited beside a circular stone basin. He was a lean, silver-haired man with ink on every finger and the permanently troubled expression of someone responsible for structures no one appreciated until they failed. Beside him stood his niece Fenella, a young witch in a practical gray gown and square spectacles. Seraphine knew her slightly from the Coven Academy. Fenella specialized in map spells and had once hidden Seraphine in a laundry cart after an argument with 6 older students. I heard about the chair, Fenella whispered as Seraphine approached. It was a throne. Even better. Dovrin cleared his throat. Your Majesty, Lady Bramblevane. Seraphine, she said. Lady Seraphine, then, we have a problem. He touched the basin. A map of the kingdom appeared across its dark water. 12 pale lines spread from the capital toward the Pact territories. 3 northern lines flickered. The moon wards have weakened for 6 months, Dovrin said. At first we blamed winter damage, Then the failures began moving south in a pattern. A pattern toward the capital, Valor said. Yes. Every damaged ward contains a dense knot of corrupted magic. We have tried cutting the knots apart. They reform. We have tried burning them. They absorb the fire. Fenella placed a black stone on the table. It looked ordinary until Seraphine came close. Then the velvet box in her hands began to hum. The silver-blue sphere rose from its cushion. Dovrin took a quick step back. Valor moved between Seraphine and the others, not to block her from the sphere, but to shield the room if it flew. "Do not," she said. He looked over his shoulder. "Do not stand in front of me whenever my magic moves. I need to see it." He considered this and stepped to her side instead. "Better?" "Yes." The sphere floated above her palm. It had never done that for more than 3 breaths. 1, 2, 3. It remained. Seraphine forgot the room. She focused on the turning silver threads inside the sphere. Her teachers had always ordered her to push magic outward, shape it into a line, and release. Her mother had suggested something different only recently. Find the center and allow the magic to gather around it. Seraphine imagined a small moon. The sphere steadied. Fenella whispered, "It is beautiful." The black ward stone trembled. A thread of dark magic lifted from its surface and stretched toward the sphere. "Stop," Dovrin said sharply. "That corruption may enter her core." Seraphine did not stop. She felt no invasion. The sphere drew the thread inward, wrapped silver light around it, and compressed it into a dark speck at the center. The stone cleared. The sphere dropped. Valor caught her wrist with one hand and the magic sphere with the other. The impact drove his boots half an inch across the floor. Dovrin stared. "That object weighs at least 400 pounds. 360, Seraphine said automatically. "Perhaps more after breakfast." Valor set it carefully into the basin's empty stone ring. "You can estimate its weight?" "I have broken enough scales." Fenella rushed forward. "You absorbed the corruption. Do you feel ill, dizzy, angry, compelled to overthrow the kingdom?" Seraphine considered. "Hungry." "She was hungry before," Valor said. Dovrin bent over the purified ward stone. This was not destroyed. The corruption was separated and contained. Mevrienne entered with 2 assistants carrying books. She took in the sphere, the cleaned stone, and Valor's hand still around Seraphine's wrist. "Promising," she said. Valor released Seraphine at once. Her mother looked amused. "I referred to the sphere." "So did I," Valor said. "Of course." Seraphine lifted the sphere back into its box. It was much lighter now. The dark speck remained at the center like a distant star. "The ward knots may be the same kind of compressed magic," she said. "If I can contain one, perhaps I can remove them from the roads." Dovrin shook his head. "The nearest failure is at Frostbarrow Quarry. The knot there is larger than this room." "Then I will make a larger sphere." "You cannot control one plum-sized sphere for an hour." Seraphine met his worried eyes. "That is why I train before we go." Valor folded his arms. "We leave in 7 days." Dovrin looked appalled. "Your Majesty, I was arguing against the journey." "Then you should have argued better." 7 days is not enough. The northern ward may fail in 9. Mevrienne placed her books on the table. "My daughter will be ready to examine the knot. She will not be ready to remove it alone." "She will not be alone," Valor said. Seraphine watched him. "Do kings normally accompany experimental witches into unstable quarries?" "Only the attractive ones." Fenella made a choking noise. Valor's expression remained perfectly composed. Seraphine pointed at him. "That was deliberate. I am told courtship requires effort." Your effort is dangerous. So is yours. For the next 7 days, Seraphine trained beneath the old tower until her arms ached for reasons that had nothing to do with lifting stone. Mavrian redesigned every exercise. Instead of pushing magic through narrow wand channels, Seraphine learned to gather it around weighted centers. Dovrin created iron rings of different sizes. Fenella drew maps of the sphere's movement and shouted warnings whenever furniture entered the likely path. Vylor attended whenever council duties allowed. He never gave magical advice. He held shields, moved damaged equipment, and asked practical questions. When Seraphine failed, he did not soften his face with pity. When she succeeded, he did not behave as if he had granted the success. On the second day, she formed 2 spheres. They immediately chased each other around the chamber and trapped Dovrin behind a pillar. On the third day, she managed 3. One attached itself to Valor's belt and pulled him sideways into a curtain. Seraphine laughed so hard she lost control of the other 2, which rolled after him like loyal cannonballs. The king emerged from the curtain with his dignity mostly intact. "Your magic likes me," he said. "My magic attacks furniture and authority. It has excellent judgment." On the 4th day, the spheres circled her without striking anything. Valor stood inside the ring at her request, close enough to intervene but not in her path. His presence created a different kind of difficulty. Every time she looked up, she saw his dark hair, broad shoulders, and patient attention. One sphere drifted toward him. "Seraphine," her mother warned. "I know." The sphere hovered near Valor's chest. He did not move. "It is responding to focus," Mavrian said. Fenella adjusted her spectacles. "Very intense focus." Seraphine's face heated. "I am concentrating on not hitting him." "Naturally," Fenella said. Valor lifted one hand beneath the sphere. It settled above his palm without touching him. "What do you feel?" he asked. "Annoyed." "About the magic?" She closed her eyes. "It wants an anchor, something stable enough that I do not need to hold every direction at once." "Use me." Her eyes opened. The room became very quiet. Vylor held her gaze as the anchor. "You could have begun with that." You would have missed Fenella's expression. Fenella turned away, shoulders shaking. Seraphine imagined the sphere orbiting Valor as a fixed point. It moved around him slowly, then faster, maintaining an exact distance from his body. A second sphere joined it, then a third. For the first time, the magic obeyed without strain. Valor stood in the center of 3 turning moons, watching her as though the rest of the chamber had vanished. Seraphine felt the pull between them through the magic, not ownership, balance. His steadiness allowed her power to move. "You are very useful," she said. "I will have that engraved on the throne." "The one your brother is no longer using?" "Especially that one." On the 5th day, Lucivar came to watch. He stood at the chamber entrance while Seraphine guided 4 spheres through iron rings. Caldrissa was with him. She wore a plain blue training gown rather than court red, and she kept her hands folded tightly. Seraphine's concentration broke. The 4th sphere struck a practice shield. The shield spun across the room and pinned Dovrin's coat to the wall. He sighed. "This is why I own duplicates." Lucivar stepped forward. "Seraphine, may we speak?" Her chest tightened with the old reflex to listen whenever his voice turned gentle. Valor said nothing. He stood beside the shield rack, arms folded, his expression unreadable. Seraphine lowered the spheres into their rings. "You may speak here." Lucivar glanced at the others. "Privately." "No." The answer surprised them both. Lucivar looked wounded. Once, that expression would have made Seraphine rush to soften her words. She did not. "I wanted to apologize," he said. "The ceremony became cruel. I did not intend the court to mock you. You invited them before rejecting me. The Southern Council insisted on witnesses. The council has insisted on many things. You used to ask whether they were right. His gaze fell to the spheres. I did not understand your magic was this close to awakening. The words landed with terrible clarity. Seraphine had imagined 100 reasons for his choice: fear, pressure, ambition, confusion. She had not allowed herself to imagine the simplest one. He would have chosen her if her power had appeared sooner. He had not rejected her because he stopped caring. He had rejected the version of her who had not yet become useful enough. "Thank you," she said. Lucifer blinked. "For what?" "For making that clear. Seraphine, I meant that I was wrong. You were wrong when I was still failing. You are only uncomfortable now that other people can see it." Caldrissa looked at Lucifer sharply. He took another step. "I never said your years beside me meant nothing. You said there had been a misunderstanding. I was trying to protect your dignity." Seraphine almost laughed. "By denying our entire relationship before 12 packs?" Valor pushed away from the shield rack. Lucifer turned on him. "Do not interfere." "She has answered you twice," Valor said. "I am not interfering. I am counting. You claimed her to punish me." The room chilled. Valor's voice became very soft. "My interest in Seraphine began before you learned to tie your own boots. Do not flatter yourself into becoming the center of her next choice." Lucifer stared. Seraphine stared too. Valor looked at her. "Was that too much information?" "Possibly. Continue later." "Gladly." Caldrissa stepped between the brothers. "Lucifer, we should leave." He looked at her as though he had forgotten she was there. Something in Caldrissa's face hardened. Seraphine knew that feeling. It was the pain of standing beside a man whose attention had already turned elsewhere. "Wait," Seraphine said. Caldrissa paused. Seraphine walked to her. "Did you know what he planned to say?" Caldrissa swallowed. "I knew he would announce me. I did not know he would deny everything between you." "Would it have changed your answer?" "I do not know." Shame crossed her features. "My family has debts. The Southern Council promised to restore our lands if I accepted. I told myself you and Lucifer had never made a public vow. I told myself you were strong enough to survive embarrassment." "I am," Seraphine said. "That does not make the embarrassment harmless." "I know." Lucifer said, "Caldrissa, this is not necessary." She turned on him. "You spoke for both of us in the hall. I will speak for myself now." For the first time, Seraphine saw more than the glamorous witch beside the man who had hurt her. She saw a woman pressed by debt, pride, and a family that valued her magic more than her comfort. It did not choice. It made the choice human. "I am sorry," Caldrissa said. "Not because the king claimed you, because we allowed them to laugh." Seraphine nodded once. "That apology, I accept hearing it. I have not decided whether I forgive it." "Fair." Lucifer looked between them, baffled by a conversation that did not revolve around him. Valor noticed. A difficult morning for princes. Seraphine covered a smile. Lucifer left without another word. Caldrissa followed more slowly, pausing at the door to look back at Seraphine's spheres. "They are beautiful," she said. Then she was gone. Seraphine stood very still. Valor approached, but stopped beyond reach. "Do you want comfort, solitude, or something heavy to throw?" She thought about it. All three, in that order. He opened his arms. The invitation was so unexpected that she nearly laughed. Then the ache in her chest rose again, and she stepped into him. His arms closed around her with careful strength. Her cheek rested against the high collar of his coat. He did not tell her Lucifer was unworthy or that she should be grateful for a better man. He simply held her while she breathed through the humiliation of learning that her first love had measured her by the timing of her power. When she drew back, Valor released her immediately. "Solitude next?" he asked. "Not yet." "Heavy object?" She pointed to the iron practice pillar. Together they carried it to the outer yard. Valor could have moved it alone. Seraphine knew that. He let her take most of the weight without pretending otherwise. She threw it into a sand pit. The impact sent a brown cloud over 3 startled ministers. Valor watched them run. "Effective," he said. "I feel better." "Excellent. Solitude may be postponed until after lunch." By the 7th day, Seraphine could hold 5 spheres in a stable orbit for 10 minutes. The expedition left for Frostbarrow Quarry at dawn. Valor rode at the front with 20 royal guards. Seraphine traveled beside her mother in a reinforced carriage containing Dovrin's instruments, Fenella's maps, and 6 iron cradles for magic spheres. Lucivar and Caldrissa remained in the capital by royal order, though Lucivar had argued that the Southern Alpha should join any investigation of the wards. Valor had replied, "You have a ceremonial chair to retrieve." The journey north took 2 days. Frostbarrow lay between steep gray hills where workers cut moonstone used in pack boundaries and healing halls. The quarry should have glowed after sunset. Instead, black veins spread through the exposed stone. The local forewoman, Isabet Cromere, met them at the gate. She was a broad, gray-haired woman with a missing front tooth and no patience for titles. "King," she said to Valor. "Witch, other witch, scholar, spectacled scholar." Fenella looked delighted. "I like her." Isabet pointed toward the quarry. "The lower shelf cracked this morning. I pulled the workers out, but 4 ward anchors are still below. If they break, the whole northern line goes dark." A deep vibration rolled beneath their boots. Seraphine's spheres stirred inside their iron cradles. "How long?" Valor asked. Isabet shrugged. "Could be an hour. Could be before I finish this sentence." The hillside groaned. A section of the upper path collapsed behind them, blocking the gate. Isabet looked at the new wall of stone. "Before the sentence, then?" No one laughed for long. The quarry floor split. Workers shouted from the far side. They had not all evacuated. 6 men and 2 women were trapped behind a fallen loading frame. Black light pulsed through the cracks beneath them. Valor issued orders with calm speed. Guards moved civilians uphill. Dovrin and Fenella began drawing a temporary ward. Mavrienne raised both hands and spread a silver barrier over the nearest ledge. Seraphine saw the loading frame tilt. "They will be crushed," she said. Valor followed her gaze. "The path is unstable." "So am I. We can discuss our flaws later." She ran. The first gap was 6 feet wide. Seraphine jumped it, landed on sliding stone, and used her ironwood staff to steady herself. Valor came behind her with 2 guards. "I did not ask you to follow," she shouted. "You did not need to." The loading frame dropped another inch. The trapped workers pressed against the rock wall. Seraphine wedged her staff beneath the beam and lifted. The frame weighed several tons. Her arms shook. Valor reached the beam and put his shoulder under it beside her. Together they raised it high enough for one worker to crawl free. "Move," Seraphine ordered. The workers scrambled beneath their arms. A crack opened directly under Valor's boot. Black magic surged upward. Seraphine's velvet box tore open at her belt. The silver-blue sphere shot into the crack and expanded. For one heartbeat, it was the size of an apple. Then a shield. Then a great glowing globe filling the gap beneath them. The corrupted light bent toward it. Seraphine felt the sphere pull at her mind. It wanted everything: the darkness in the stone, the strength in her arms, the fear in the workers, even the moonlight hidden behind the clouds. "Center," Mevrian called from the ledge. Find the center, Seraphine. Do not fight the shape. Seraphine trusted her mother. She stopped trying to flatten the magic into a shield. She imagined a moon beneath the earth. The sphere became round and steady. Darkness streamed into it. The loading frame grew lighter as the corrupted ward released its hold on the metal. Now, Valor said. They lifted together. The last worker escaped. The stone shelf beneath Seraphine broke away. Valor caught her around the waist. She caught the beam with one hand and his armor collar with the other. For a ridiculous moment, the Alpha King hung over the glowing gap, supported partly by a witch who had once been told she could not lift a proper spell. I have you, he said. I have you too. This is not how I imagined our second embrace. Your expectations are very demanding. One of the guards seized Valor's arm. Together they climbed onto stable ground. The great sphere rose from the crack, now streaked with black. It floated above the quarry, pulling corruption from every vein of stone. Seraphine stood beneath it with both hands. Welcome to Moonlit Romance Library. Please follow for more stories. Chapter 1: Blood on the Snow. The military parade square of Arventhor smelled like iron in winter. Alara Voss stood at the edge of the square, one gauntleted hand wrapped around the reins of her black warhorse, the other pressed flat against her own thigh to stop the trembling. The trembling was not fear. It was the aftermath of killing 7 men in the border ambush 3 hours ago, the last of whom had driven a serrated blade across her left wrist before she'd taken his throat with her sword pommel. The wound had been wrapped in a torn strip of her own cloak. The blood had frozen into the fabric. She could feel it cracking every time she moved her fingers. Behind her, Noctis, her warhorse, her oldest companion, the meanest animal in the royal stables, snorted and stamped one massive hoof into the snow. He did this whenever he was bored, annoyed, or plotting to bite someone. At present, she suspected all three. Easy, she murmured. Noctis flattened his ears and tossed his head sideways, yanking the reins hard enough to jolt her injured wrist. She hissed through her teeth. He had the temperament of a drunken tavern brawler and the intelligence of a war strategist, and he had never once in his life been easy about anything. She'd found him 6 years ago in a burned-out border stable, a half-starved yearling with hooves too big for his legs and fury in every line of his body. The stable master had warned her not to go near him. He bites, the man had said. He kicks. He'll kill you if you try to saddle him. Alara had walked in anyway, because she'd recognized something in those wild black eyes. She had been 15. She'd had no wolf form, no noble bloodline, no mother, and a father who drank himself to sleep every night in a guardsman's barracks. She understood what it meant to be angry and have no one to explain it to. She'd sat in the corner of his stall for 3 hours. She hadn't touched him. She'd simply sat there eating an apple, and when she was done, she'd placed the core on the ground and left. The next morning, the core was gone. The morning after that, she brought 2 apples. By the 4th day, he'd come close enough to breathe on her hair. By the 7th, he'd let her touch his nose. He'd bitten her on the 8th day, hard enough to leave a scar on her shoulder, and she'd bitten him back. Not literally, but she'd flicked his ear so hard he'd startled backward into the wall. They had understood each other perfectly ever since. Now Noctis shoved his massive head against her back, pushing her forward half a step. He wanted to leave. He had wanted to leave since they'd arrived. Horses were not stupid creatures, whatever the nobles said, and Noctis in particular possessed an uncanny ability to sense when a situation was about to become terrible. But she could not leave, not yet. Ahead of her, the parade square was arranged in the rigid formations of a royal acknowledgement ceremony. The Council of Elders occupied the raised stone dais at the center, 7 ancient werewolves in silver-trimmed black robes, their faces carved into permanent expressions of disapproval. Flanking them were the noble houses, arranged by rank, fur-lined cloaks, jeweled circlets, gloved hands clasped over embroidered sashes. To the left, the soldiers of the Crown Guard stood in polished rows, breath steaming in the cold. To the right, the court ladies and lesser nobles clustered together like a flock of brightly plumed birds. And in the center of it all, standing on the frost-covered stone with his back to her, was Aldrich. Crown Prince Aldrich Veyron, her fated mate. Even now, even with blood frozen to her wrist and 7 kills sitting heavy in her bones, the sight of him made something twist beneath her ribs. Not the mate bond, though that was there too, that low golden hum that had lived inside her chest since she was 17 and first felt it snap into place. This was older than the bond. This was memory. This was the boy who had pulled her out of a frozen river when she was 12, who had taught her the sword forms the weapons master wouldn't teach girls, who had sat beside her on a parapet at dawn and said, "You don't need a wolf, Alara. You already fight like one." She had loved him since before she knew what the word meant. Aldrich turned. Even across the width of the parade square, she could see how the cold had sharpened his features. The strong jaw, the dark brow, the mouth that was too severe for softness but had once smiled at her like she was the only warmth in the kingdom. His black hair was pushed back from his face, and his golden eyes, wolf eyes always, found her immediately. Something flickered there, pain maybe, or guilt. Noctis snorted again, louder this time, and Alara felt the reins go taut as he shifted his weight. He never liked Aldrich. Even in the early days when she and Aldrich had been inseparable, the horse had regarded the crown prince with the particular disdain of an animal who could smell dishonesty long before it arrived. "Stand," she told him quietly. He stomped, twice. She ignored him because Lady Cordelia Ashworth was stepping forward. Cordelia was beautiful. That had never been in dispute. She had auburn hair that fell in perfect waves, a waist like a drawn bowstring, skin that had never been within spitting distance of a battlefield, and a laugh that sounded like crystal chimes designed specifically to make other women feel inadequate. She was the daughter of Lord Ashworth, the wealthiest nobleman in Arventhor, and she had been presented to the council as a suitable Luna candidate 6 months ago. Around the same time, the whispers about Alara's lack of wolf form had grown too loud to ignore. Cordelia placed her hand on Aldrich's arm. It was a small gesture, delicate, possessive, perfectly calculated. Alara saw it. The entire square saw it. That was, of course, the point. Aldrich did not remove the hand. And then he spoke. "Lady Cordelia has stood faithfully beside the crown during the recent border conflicts," he said, his voice carrying across the parade ground with the practiced ease of a man raised to address armies. "Her devotion to the council's guidance and the traditions of our bloodline is beyond reproach." Beside Alara, Noctis made a sound that could only be described as derisive. She agreed with him, but she kept her face still. She had spent 10 years in this court. She knew how to hold her expression. She knew how to stand with blood soaking through her glove and not let a single person see her flinch. Elder Hargrave, the eldest and most venomous member of the council, leaned forward on the dais. "And what of the knight, Your Highness?" Its jaw tightened. She saw it, the microflexion, the way his eyes darted toward her and then deliberately pulled away. "The knight?" "Sir Alara Voss." Hargrave's voice was thin and precise, like a needle threading through silk. "Your personal guard. The soldiers report she single-handedly broke the ambush at the Thornwinter Pass this morning. 7 enemy wolves, was it? While the rest of your escort was pinned down?" Silence in the square. The soldiers shifted. Some of them had been there. Some of them had watched her walk into that ambush with nothing but a sword and a warhorse while they cowered behind overturned carts. "She performed her duty," Aldrich said. "Her duty." Alara's fingers tightened on the reins. "Indeed." Hargrave smiled, and it was the smile of a man who had already arranged the outcome of this conversation. "And what is her duty, precisely?" "I ask because there has been some confusion among the court about the nature of her position." Cordelia lifted her chin. The torchlight caught the sapphires at her throat. "Surely there is no confusion, Elder. Sir Voss is a guard, a sword, a useful tool." She let the word tool hang in the air like a jewel she was admiring. "But one does not elevate a hunting dog to the throne simply because it bites well." Laughter. Small, controlled, noble laughter, the kind that was designed to humiliate without providing anything concrete enough to challenge. Alara felt the bond pulse, Aldrich's emotions bleeding through. Shame, guilt, and underneath that, a desperate, furious fear she didn't understand. She waited for him to speak, to correct Cordelia, to say something. His golden eyes met hers across the square, and in them she saw the thing she'd been afraid to name for months. Apology. "Sir Voss is my guard," Aldrich said. His voice was clear and carried to every corner. "She is not my Luna. A woman without a wolf is unworthy of standing beside the throne." The world went very quiet. Or perhaps it went very loud and Alara simply stopped hearing it. The words hit her somewhere beneath the mate bond, beneath the muscle and bone, in the place where she had kept every promise he'd ever made her, every dawn patrol together, every battlefield prayer, every whispered "I will always choose you." A woman without a wolf. Unworthy. The nobles were watching her, the soldiers were watching her. Cordelia was watching her with barely concealed satisfaction, her hand still resting on Aldrich's arm like a flag planted on conquered territory. The council watched with the hungry patience of men who had been waiting for this moment. They wanted her to cry. She knew this with the clarity of a sword edge. They wanted her to kneel, to beg, to ask Aldrich to explain, to provide some spectacle of feminine desperation they could reference for years when they needed an example of why wolfless women should not presume. Noctis pressed his nose against her shoulder. His breath was warm and his nostrils flared, and his ears were flat against his skull in the expression she recognized as his battle face. He wanted to charge. He had always wanted to solve problems by charging at them. In this, at least, they were not alike. Alara reached up and unclasped the silver badge from her armor. It was a simple thing, a wolf rampant over a crown, the mark of the royal personal guard. She had worn it since she was 18. It had been pinned over her heart when she'd killed her first enemy wolf. It had been stained with mud, blood, rain, and once, memorably, horse spit when Noctis had sneezed directly onto her chest during an inspection. She held it up so the torchlight caught it. Then she threw it into the snow at Aldrich's feet. The sound it made was very small. The silence that followed was enormous. "Sir Voss," Aldrich began. "That's the last order I'll follow," she said. Her voice was steady. She would make it steady if it killed her. "And I wasn't a dog, Your Highness. I was the only one willing to stand between you and every blade aimed at your throat. The dog was whoever taught you to call it nothing." She turned. She mounted Noctis in a single fluid motion that sent a lance of pain through her injured wrist, but she'd mounted this horse in worse condition, with a broken rib once, with an arrow shaft still lodged in her thigh once, during a thunderstorm that had driven every other horse in the stable to panic. This was nothing. This was just her heart. Noctis needed no command. He surged forward, and the crowd parted, not for her, but for him, because he was 16 hands of black fury, and he had a documented history of biting anyone who didn't move fast enough. Behind her, she heard Aldrich call her name. She did not turn. They reached the drawbridge before the shouting started. The royal city of Arventhor was built on a high plateau, accessible only through the Great Gate and its ancient drawbridge over the Frostclaw Gorge. The bridge was wide enough for 4 horses abreast, paved in dark stone, and flanked by carved wolf statues that had watched 1,000 years of comings and goings with the same blank expression. Noctis's hooves rang against the stone. Below, the gorge dropped into mist and darkness. Above, the sky was the color of a bruise, violet and black and swollen with snow that had not yet fallen. Alara stopped at the center of the bridge. The mate bond hummed inside her chest. She could feel Aldrich through it, his panic, his guilt, his fury at himself, his desperate certainty that she would come back. She always came back. She had always come back. After every slight, every public humiliation, every whispered insult from courtiers who called her the wolfless shadow, the broken blade, the guard who warmed the prince's bed because she couldn't warm his throne, she had swallowed it and she had come back. Not tonight. She closed her eyes. She reached inside herself, past the pain in her wrist, past the exhaustion in her bones, past 10 years of loving a man who could announce her worthlessness to the entire kingdom and still expect her to return. She found the bond. It was there, golden and warm, woven into the center of her being like a thread spun from sunlight. It connected her to Aldrich, his heartbeat, his breath, his wolf. She had lived with it for so long that she no longer remembered what silence felt like. She wrapped her will around it, and she pulled. The pain was immediate and absolute. It felt like reaching into her own chest and tearing out a rib. No, worse. It felt like reaching into her soul and ripping out the part that had learned to love. The golden thread screamed as it frayed. Noctis shrieked beneath her, rearing, because he could feel it too. The shockwave of a fated bond being forcibly severed, something so unnatural that even the stones of the bridge seemed to shudder. She didn't stop. She pulled until the thread snapped. The silence that followed was the most terrible sound she had ever heard. She swayed in the saddle. The world tilted. The gorge gaped below her like a mouth, and for one dizzying moment she thought she was going to fall, off the horse, off the bridge, into the dark. Noctis caught her. Not literally, because horses didn't catch people, but he did what he always did when she was about to break. He planted his hooves, lowered his massive body, and shifted his weight so that she fell forward against his neck, instead of sideways into nothing. His mane was coarse and warm against her face. He stood absolutely still, his breath steaming in the cold, and he waited. She pressed her forehead against his neck and did not cry. After a long moment, she straightened. Her chest felt hollowed out, as if someone had scooped out everything soft and left only bone and determination. "Okay," she whispered. Noctis flicked one ear. "Forward." He walked, steady, sure, carrying her off the bridge and onto the mountain road beyond the gate, into the snow and the dark and the vast, empty world that no longer had a golden thread connecting it to a man who had called her unworthy. Behind her, inside the city, she thought she heard a wolf howl. Aldrich's wolf, recognizing the severance, screaming into the night. She did not look back. Chapter 2. The Night Between. The stable widow's name was Marin. She had been waiting at the last way station before the mountain road, a stone shelter built into the cliff face, half hidden by snow, used by border patrols and occasionally by women leaving the royal city in circumstances that did not permit the main gate. Marin was 47, sturdy as an oak barrel, with iron-gray hair braided tight against her sons that had seen more horse ailments than any noble healer had seen human ones. She had run the lower stables of Arventhor for 20 years, and in all that time she had been invisible. Nobles did not notice the woman who fed their horses. They noticed only when the horse was lame, and then they blamed her. Alara had noticed her. At 14, new to the guard barracks and friendless, Alara had spent more time in the lower stables than in the training yard because the horses didn't care that she had no wolf. Marin had found her there one night, a skinny blonde girl asleep in a hay pile with a wild yearling standing guard over her, and had simply draped a blanket over her and said nothing. In the years since, their friendship had been conducted almost entirely through the horse. Marin treated Noctis's hooves, trimmed his mane, checked his teeth, adjusted his saddle, mixed his feed, and reported his moods to Alara with the clinical precision of a field medic. She was the only person besides Alara that Noctis tolerated, and even that tolerance had limits. He'd bitten through 2 of her leather aprons, and once deliberately stood on her foot during a shoeing. Now Marin stood at the way station door with a lantern in one hand and a feed bag in the other, and she looked at Alara with the expression of a woman who had already heard the news and had been packed for 3 hours. "I changed his shoes this afternoon," Marin said, handing Alara the feed bag. "New iron. Good grip for mountain snow. There's a poultice in the left saddlebag for that wrist. Don't argue, I can see the blood from here. And I packed dried meat, grain, 2 water skins, and the herb mix he likes. The one with the fennel." Alara stared at her. "How did you—" "I know that horse." Marin jerked her chin toward Noctis, who was already nosing the feed bag with the aggressive enthusiasm of an animal who believed every meal might be his last. He's been agitated for 3 days, stamping, refusing the stable, snapping at the grooms. He knew before you did. Noctis lifted feed bag long enough to snort in what sounded like confirmation. Alara dismounted. The pain in her chest, the hollow, torn-open cavity where the bond had been, flared so intensely that she grabbed the saddle to stay upright. Marin reached for her arm, steadied her, said nothing about the way Alara's face had gone white. "I don't know where you're going tonight," Marin said. Her voice was quiet, practical, the voice of a woman who had lived her entire life in a world that undervalued practical women and had stopped expecting it to change. "But he knows." She nodded toward Noctis. "He's been impatient to take you away." Alara's throat closed. She wanted to say something. "Thank you," or "goodbye," or "I'm sorry I never spoke up when the stable master shorted your wages," or "you deserved better than this invisible life." But Marin was already adjusting Noctis's girth strap, checking the saddlebag buckles, running her hands along his legs the way she'd done 1,000 times. "The border road is passable as far as the Grey Mark," Marin said. "After that, you'll be in disputed territory. The enemy factions patrol the passes after dark, but they don't usually bother lone riders. Too much trouble for too little gain." She paused. "Unless the rider is someone important." "I'm not important." Marin looked at her with eyes that held 20 years of watching a wolfless girl become the strongest knight in the kingdom. "You're important to him," she said, and touched Noctis's nose. "That's enough for me." Noctis bumped Marin's hand with his massive head, and then, in a display of affection so rare that Alara almost lost her composure, he lowered his nose and breathed gently on the older woman's hair. "Go," Marin said. "And when you get where you're going, check his left foreleg. He's been favoring it, but he won't show you until it suits him. Stubborn creature." Alara mounted. The pain pulsed. Noctis moved beneath her, steady as stone. She rode into the snowfield. She made it 4 miles before the first backlash hit. The broken bond didn't heal cleanly. She had known it wouldn't. The old text said that severing a fated bond was like amputating a limb, except the limb was made of emotion, and the phantom pain lasted forever. What the old texts hadn't mentioned was the sound. A wolf howling inside her skull, not her wolf, because she didn't have one, but the echo of Aldrich's wolf, trapped in the remnant of the bond like a voice caught in an empty room. The pain doubled her over. Noctis stopped immediately, his ears swiveling back, and when she slumped against his neck, he turned his head and nudged her knee with his nose. Hard, repeatedly, as if to say, "You are not allowed to fall off. I did not carry you this far for you to fall off in a snowfield like a sack of turnips." "I'm fine," she lied. He stomped his hoof. "I'm mostly fine." He stomped again, harder. "Shut up." He didn't shut up. He stood in the middle of the snowfield and made increasingly offended noises until she straightened in the saddle and took the reins. Then, and only then, did he continue walking, at a pace that suggested he was doing her a tremendous personal favor. The snowfield was vast and empty under the moon. The border mountains rose to the west, dark and jagged, and the wind came down from the peaks carrying the scent of pine and stone and distance. Alara had patrolled this territory 100 times. She knew every ridge, every frozen stream, every abandoned watchtower. She had never ridden it alone at night, in pain, with no badge and no bond and no name except the one she'd been born with. It was, she thought grimly, a terrible night to be free. Chapter 3: Wolves in the Snow. They came from the north. She heard them before she saw them. The crunch of paws in snow, the low, coordinated breathing of wolves running in formation. Not feral wolves, werewolves. Shifted, moving fast, cutting across the snowfield in a flanking arc designed to close a trap. Alara's hand found her sword hilt. The motion sent a bolt of agony through her torn wrist, but she gripped anyway because the alternative was dying, and she had not ripped her own soul in half just to bleed out in a snowfield. Noctis felt her shift. His ears went flat. His stride lengthened. He knew this, the prelude to violence, and unlike most horses, he did not shy from it. He leaned into it. There were 6, no, 8, dark-furred, fast, moving in pairs. They weren't border wolves. Their formation was too disciplined, their coordination too precise. These were hunters, and they were hunting her. The first one broke from the pack and lunged. Alara drew her sword and cut. The motion was instinct. 10 years of training, 1,000 sparring sessions, 100 real fights. The blade caught moonlight as it arced, and the wolf yelped as the flat of the sword cracked across its skull. She didn't use the edge. She didn't need to kill. She needed to break the formation. Noctis screamed, a high, furious sound that no well-bred warhorse should make, and kicked backward with both hind legs. The wolf behind them tumbled, rolled, scrambled up dazed. 2 more came from the left. Alara wheeled Noctis, and he responded like the warhorse he was, pivoting on his haunches, surging forward, driving his armored chest into the nearest wolf and sending it sprawling. She swung the sword again, flat side, and felt the impact jar up her arm. But there were too many, and her wrist was failing. The torn ligaments protested every swing, and the backlash pain in her chest was still there, still throbbing, making her reactions a half-second slow. A wolf snapped at Noctis's leg. She kicked it away. Another lunged for her saddle. She smashed the pommel into its nose. The pack was regrouping. She could see it, the shift in their pattern, the way the remaining wolves were spreading out to encircle rather than attack head-on. They were adapting to her fighting style. That meant they'd been briefed. That meant sent them. She was going to get off this horse and fight on foot, because from the ground she could protect Noctis's legs. She would not let them hurt him. She could take a wound. She could take 10 wounds. He could not. She swung down. Noctis tried to follow, and she shoved his head away. Go! Run! He didn't. He never did. He simply planted himself behind her like a black wall and bared his teeth at the circling wolves with an expression that said, "Come closer. I dare you. I have been wanting to bite something all day." Alara raised her sword with both hands. The wrist screamed. She ignored it. She set her feet in the snow and waited. The wolves charged. And then, light. Not torchlight, not moonlight. Something brighter and hotter, a blue-white flare that split the darkness like a blade. It came from the ridge above the snowfield, accompanied by the sound of hooves, fast, controlled, descending, and a voice that carried across the snow with a calm, almost conversational authority. That's enough. A rider appeared on the ridge. He was silhouetted against the moonlit sky, and for a moment all Alara could see was the outline. Broad shoulders, a dark cloak, a horse that was almost as large as Noctis. Then he descended, and the moonlight found his face, and Alara's breath caught in a way that had nothing to do with pain. He was beautiful. Not beautiful the way Aldrich was beautiful, sharp and golden and bright. This was a different kind of beauty, dark, cool, dangerous, the way a winter storm was beautiful when you watched it from a cliff's edge. Black hair pushed back from a face carved in clean, sharp lines, eyes the color of pale frost, blue-gray, almost silver, set beneath dark brows, a jawline like a blade. A mouth that looked like it had been designed specifically to deliver devastating statements with no warning. He rode a pale gray warhorse, and he moved with the absolute ease of a man who had been born on horseback and had never once in his life been thrown. Behind him, on the ridge, she could see more riders, an escort held back. The wolves stopped. They didn't flee, they simply stopped mid-charge, as if a leash had been pulled taut. Their heads lowered, their tails dropped. One of them whined. The stranger rode down into the snowfield. His pale horse picked its way through the snow with fastidious precision, and the rider's eyes swept the scene. The circling wolves, the blood in the snow, the woman standing alone with a shaking sword, the black warhorse behind her with murder in his eyes. His gaze settled on Alara. He studied her for a moment. The bloody armor, the torn wrist, the defiant stance, the absence of any wolf aura whatsoever. And something shifted in his expression. Not pity. Pity she could have identified and rejected. This was something closer to interest. "They're mine," he said, nodding toward the wolves. "Border Patrol. They were supposed to be tracking a supply convoy. He paused, not chasing injured women through snowfields. One of the wolves shifted, bones cracking, fur receding, into a man. He was young, scarred, sheepish. "My lord, she came out of the royal city. We thought—" "I know what you thought. You were wrong." The stranger's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "Fall back, all of you." They fell back. Every wolf, immediately. No hesitation, no argument. This was not the obedience of fear. It was the obedience of absolute authority, the kind that was so certain of itself it never needed to shout. The stranger dismounted. He was tall, taller than Aldrich, with the build of a man who fought regularly and well. He moved toward Alara, and she raised her sword. "Stay back." He stopped. He looked at the sword, then at her wrist, then at the blood soaking through her glove. "Your grip is failing on the right side," he said. "Your wrist is either fractured or badly torn. You've been riding for at least 4 hours in this cold, which means the tissue is swelling inside the wrap, and if you swing that sword one more time, you're going to lose the use of your hand for a month." He paused. "I have a field medic with my escort and horse feed." The mention of horse feed almost undid her. Not for herself, she could have borne any amount of suffering, but Noctis had been carrying her for hours, had fought beside her, had not been fed since Marin's way station. Behind her, Noctis's ears pricked at the word feed. "You're from the border faction," she said. Her voice was flat, assessing. "The Kelrith Wolves." "I'm the lord of the Kelrith Wolves," he said. "Ronan Kelrith." He inclined his head, not a bow, an acknowledgement. "And you are the woman who just fought off 8 of my best hunters with a broken wrist and a horse that appears to be personally offended by the existence of wolves." Noctis snorted. It was his most judgmental snort. Ronan's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. Something better, the suppression of one. "You may leave, or you may stay. Just do not faint in front of my horse." He jerked his chin toward the pale gray warhorse, which was watching the proceedings with an expression of aristocratic boredom. "My horse is very fond of reporting incidents." Alara looked at him. The pain in her chest was a constant roar, and her wrist was on fire, and she was alone on an enemy snowfield talking to a man who should, by all logic, be her adversary. But his eyes were steady, and his voice held no mockery, and he had stopped his wolves without violence. "Do not worry," she said. "I only faint in front of my own horse. It has better manners." This time, Ronan's mouth definitely twitched. Behind her, Noctis did something extraordinary. He lifted his head, looked directly at Ronan, and then turned his body so that he was standing between them, a black wall of horse blocking Ronan's path to Alara entirely. "Your horse," Ronan observed, "does not like me." "My horse doesn't like anyone." "A quality I respect." He stepped to the side. Noctis stepped to block him. He stepped the other way. Noctis mirrored him. This continued for 3 full repetitions, with increasing absurdity, until Noctis leaned forward and clamped his teeth onto the edge of Ronan's cloak. Ronan looked down at the horse holding his cloak hostage. He looked up at Alara. His expression was one of absolute, perfect composure, marred only slightly by the fact that an angry warhorse was slowly eating his clothing. "Is this a negotiation?" he asked. "He thinks so." "What are his terms?" Despite everything, despite the pain, the cold, the ruins of her life, Alara felt the corner of her mouth lift. He wants the feed first, and he doesn't share. Ronan reached slowly into his saddlebag, produced a handful of grain, and held it out. Noctis eyed him, eyed the grain, and released the cloak with a contemptuous flip of his head. He took the grain. He chewed it with the air of a king accepting tribute. "There," Ronan said. "Your bodyguard is appeased. May I approach now, or does the horse require further concessions?" Alara sheathed her sword. The motion made black spots dance across her vision, and she reached for Noctis's saddle to steady herself. Ronan's hand caught her elbow. Not her waist, not her shoulders, her elbow, the most neutral point of contact possible. His fingers were warm through the armor, and his grip was firm without being forceful. "The medic," he said. "Now." She wanted to refuse. She was Alara Voss, the strongest knight in Arventhor, and she did not accept help from enemy lords in snowfields. But Noctis nudged her back, hard, and the world was graying at the edges, and the hollow place where the bond had been was screaming. "Fine," she said. "But if any of your wolves touch my horse, I'll kill them with my left hand." "I believe you," Ronan said, and for the first time she heard something in his voice that sounded genuine. Chapter 4. The Enemy's Hearth. The Kelrith border camp was not what she expected. She had expected a war camp, crude, temporary, designed for aggression. What she found was a mountain stronghold carved into the living rock of the Greymarch Pass, with high walls, warm fires, a well-stocked stable, and the general atmosphere of a community that had been here for generations and intended to remain. Ronan's people watched her with curiosity but not hostility. They were border wolves, harder than the court wolves of Arventhor, weathered by wind and war, but there was none of the cruelty she'd been told to expect. The soldiers nodded at their lord. The camp workers moved with purpose. Children, actual children, darted between the buildings, chasing each other through the snow. Alara had been told her entire life that the Kelrith faction was savage, lawless, dangerous. She was beginning to suspect that whoever had told her that had never actually visited. Noctis was installed in the stable with the ceremony usually reserved for visiting royalty, primarily because he threatened every groom who approached him until Ilara personally introduced them. Even then, he bit one on the sleeve. Ilara pretended not to notice. Noctis pretended he hadn't done it. The groom pretended his sleeve had always been torn. It was a functional arrangement. The medic, a brisk, efficient woman named Helwyn, examined Alara's wrist with the impersonal competence of someone who had treated 100 such injuries and was bored by this one. Torn ligament, deep bruise on the bone, not fractured, which means you're either very lucky or very hard to break. Helwyn wound a clean bandage with hands that could have performed surgery in a thunderstorm. 3 weeks minimum before you swing a sword. 4 would be better. I'll need it in 2. Then you'll lose the wrist. I'll need it in 2, Alara repeated. Helwyn gave her a look that conveyed in a single glance an entire medical textbook's worth of disapproval. Then she packed the wrist with a poultice that smelled like winter herbs and fire, wrapped it tight, and said, 2 weeks, but if it snaps, don't come crying to me. Alara didn't intend to come crying to anyone. She hadn't cried in 6 years. Ronan appeared after the medic left. He'd removed his riding cloak and wore a dark wool tunic beneath, and in the firelight of the stone chamber, the sharp planes of his face were thrown into relief. He set a tray on the table: bread, dried meat, hot broth, water. "When did you last eat?" She tried to remember. The morning? No, yesterday morning. She'd been in the saddle since before dawn for the border run that had ended in the ambush, and after the ambush there had been the parade, and after the parade there had been the bridge. Recently, she lied. He studied her. Those frost-pale eyes missed nothing. "You're a terrible liar. I suspect that's unusual for someone who survived 10 years in the Arventhor court." "I didn't survive by lying. I survived by being useful." "And now?" She looked at the fire. The hollow in her chest pulsed. "Now I'm not useful to anyone." "That," Ronan said, pulling a chair to the table and sitting across from her with the easy grace of a man who owned the room and everyone in it, "is the most absurd thing I've heard today, and I spent this morning listening to my scout explain how he lost an entire supply convoy to a badger." She looked at him. "A badger. A very determined badger." He pushed the tray toward her. "Eat. You're no good to anyone dead, and I have questions." She ate. The broth was hot and good, and the bread was better than anything the royal kitchens had produced in months. And the simple act of eating, of being warm, of being fed, of sitting in a place where no one was calling her worthless, was so overwhelming that she had to stop twice and breathe. Ronan watched her. He said nothing. This, she was learning, was one of his qualities. He knew when silence was more useful than speech. When she'd finished, he asked, "Who sent the hunters after you?" "What hunters?" "The wolves in the snowfield. They weren't mine, not the patrol I'd assigned. Someone else deployed them. Someone who knew you'd be on that road tonight." His eyes were sharp. "The Arventhor court isn't known for releasing its assets voluntarily, so who wanted you found?" She considered lying. She considered telling him nothing. But the exhaustion was bone deep, and the truth was simple, and she was so tired of navigating the maze of court deception. "The Council of Elders," she said. "They've been watching me for months. They think my bloodline is abnormal." "Abnormal how?" "I don't have a wolf form." "I noticed." "But they think," she stopped. She didn't actually know what they thought. She only knew that the scrutiny had intensified, that Aldrich had become increasingly desperate to distance himself from her publicly, and that the council's questions had grown pointed enough to draw blood. Ronan leaned back. The firelight played across his features, and she was struck again by how composed he was. Not cold, not emotionless, but contained, as if every reaction was filtered through a layer of deliberate thought. "The Council of Arventhor has a long history of executing things they don't understand," he said. "My grandfather was one of those things." He said it without anger, flat, factual, the way you'd state a historical date. "They called him a heretic. They burned his records. They said the Kelrith bloodline was tainted. This is why we're on the border instead of in the court. We weren't exiled for being weak. We were exiled for being inconvenient." Alara looked at him. There was more to this story. She could see it in the careful way he held himself, the measured cadence of his words. But he didn't push, and she recognized a man who would share his history in his own time. "I should leave in the morning," she said. "I'm not safe to be around. If the council tracks me here, then the council will find that crossing the Grey March in winter is considerably more difficult than writing decrees from a warm throw moon." He stood. "You can leave in the morning, or you can rest. The room is yours. The stable is Noctis's. And the medic will kill me if you don't sleep at least 6 hours. And she is the only person in this camp I'm genuinely afraid of." He moved toward the door. Something made her speak. "Why are you helping me?" Ronan paused. He didn't turn immediately. When he did, his expression was unreadable. "Because I came to investigate strange movements from the Royal City's army," he said. "And instead Welcome to Moonlit Romance Library. Please follow for more stories." The day Aveline Ashwood's husband came home with a younger Luna, the entire North Hall smelled of roasted venison and betrayal. She knew something was wrong the moment the iron gates groaned open at noon, because Garrick Blackmere never returned early from border campaigns. Garrick liked his wars the way he liked his ale, long, loud, and preferably involving someone else's suffering. For him to cut a 3-month campaign down to 6 weeks meant one of two things. Either the Eastern Wolf clans had surrendered spectacularly, or Garrick had found something more interesting than fighting. Aveline stood at the top of the stone staircase in Ashenmoor Keep, her hands dusted with flour because she had been in the kitchens again. She was always in the kitchens, not because anyone expected the Luna of Blackmere pack to bake bread, but because Aveline had discovered years ago that the kitchen staff were the only people in this entire frozen fortress who did not look at her with pity. "My lady." Berta, the head cook, appeared at her elbow, breathless. Berta was 63 years old, built like a wardrobe, and possessed the singular talent of being able to communicate catastrophic news through the angle of her eyebrows alone. Right now, both eyebrows were practically touching her hairline. "He's brought someone. He always brings someone. Last time it was 47 prisoners of war and a stolen catapult." "It's not a catapult." "Is it bigger than a catapult?" Berta's mouth pressed into a line so thin it nearly disappeared. "It's younger than a catapult." Aveline set down the bread dough. She wiped her hands on her apron slowly, methodically, the way she did everything, not because she was calm, but because she had learned that if she moved slowly enough, people assumed she was in control. She walked to the narrow window that overlooked the main courtyard, and she looked down. Garrick Blackmere rode through the gates on his black warhorse, his dark hair wind-tangled, his jaw sharp enough to cut accusations, his silver gray eyes catching the winter light in that way that had once made her heart stutter. He was, as always, devastatingly handsome. 6 feet and 4 inches of alpha wolf wrapped in black leather and the unshakable conviction that the world owed him something. Beside him, on a white mare with ribbons braided into its mane, rode a girl. She was perhaps 23, golden-haired, pink-cheeked, wrapped in white furs that looked brand new. She rode with the particular posture of someone who had been told she was precious approximately 400 times that morning. And on her left wrist, Aveline's wolf eyes could see it clearly from this distance, was a Luna binding mark, fresh, still faintly glowing with the amber light of a completed ceremony. "Ah," Aveline said. "My lady. That is a very nice horse she's riding." "My lady, he's bound her. The mark is—" "I can see the mark, Berta." Below, the household guard was assembling. The servants were gathering. Garrick dismounted with the easy grace of a man who expected applause for existing, and then he turned and lifted the golden-haired girl down from her horse with both hands on her waist, and she giggled. She giggled. Aveline had not giggled in approximately 4 years. She was 31 years old, and she had been Garrick's Luna since she was 22. And she had run this household through 2 border wars, a grain famine, a collapsed mine shaft, 3 outbreaks of river fever, and the time the East Tower caught fire because Garrick's beta had tried to roast a whole elk indoors. She had earned every single gray hair that she did not yet have but fully expected by next winter. And now there was a girl in her courtyard wearing her title. "Well," Aveline said, untying her apron and folding it neatly, "I suppose I should go down and introduce myself. It would be rude not to." "My lady, you don't have to." "Berta, if I don't go down there right now, I will have to go down there later, and later I will have had time to think about it, and if I think about it, I will be forced to acknowledge that my husband of 9 years has ridden home with a replacement wife like she's a new pair of boots, and I will feel something about that, and I don't feel like feeling something right now, so I'm going down." She went down. The great stone staircase of Ashenmore Keep had 114 steps. Aveline had counted them during her first week as a new bride, giddy and in love and absolutely certain that Garrick Blackmere was the greatest man alive. She counted them again now. 114 steps between who she had been 5 minutes ago and who she was about to become. The courtyard was full by the time she reached the bottom. Garrick's warriors had dismounted. The household staff had formed their usual receiving line. And there, standing at the center of it all like a painting of a saint who had wandered into the wrong chapel, was the golden-haired girl, clinging to Garrick's arm. Garrick saw Aveline. She watched it happen, the flicker of something in his silver eyes. Not guilt, exactly. Garrick Blackmere did not do guilt. It was more like the brief inconvenience of remembering that you had left a candle burning in a room you no longer intended to use. Aveline. Garrick. This is Lenora. She is the daughter of Lord Voss of Goldenmere. How nice. What is she doing here? Lenora smiled. It was a sweet smile, practiced and perfect, the kind of smile that had probably been rehearsed in a mirror decorated with dried wildflowers. "I'm so honored to finally meet you, Lady Ashwood. Garrick has told me so much about." "What is she doing here, Garrick?" The courtyard went quiet. Even the horses stopped shifting. Garrick straightened. He was taller than Aveline by nearly a foot, and he used that height now the way he always did. Not as a weapon exactly, but as a fact. A reminder that the world was built for men of his size, and everyone else was just borrowing space. "Lenora is my mate," he said, "my true mate. The bond awakened during the Eastern Campaign. I have already completed the Luna binding." There it was. Spoken in front of 50 people, the household guard, the kitchen staff, 2 stable boys, and a pigeon that had been sitting on the gate and was now regarding the whole scene with visible judgment. "Your true mate," Aveline repeated. The pull was undeniable. I resisted for weeks, but... Weeks? You resisted for weeks. I know this is difficult. You resisted for weeks. She let the words sit there. We were married for 9 years, Garrick. 9 years, and you resisted this girl for weeks. I'm genuinely impressed by your restraint. Lenora's smile wavered. She looked up at Garrick with wide, uncertain eyes. You said she would understand. She will understand, Garrick said, and his jaw tightened in that way that meant he had already decided how this conversation was going to end and was merely waiting for reality to catch up. Aveline looked at him, really looked at him, at the face she had kissed 10,000 times, at the hands she had held through nightmares, at the man she had believed was her home. She did not cry. She had cried exactly once in her marriage, the night their first and only pregnancy had ended at 3 months, and she had bled alone in their bed because Garrick had been at a council meeting and no one had wanted to interrupt him. She had decided after that night that crying was a currency she could not afford to spend on people who would not value it. You're right, she said. I understand perfectly. Then she turned to Lenora and she smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a woman who had balanced 9 years of household accounts, negotiated grain prices with merchants who thought female Lunas were decorative, and once physically carried a wounded border scout 6 miles through snow because the patrol wagon had broken an axle. Lady Lenora, welcome to Ashenmore Keep. I'll have the servants prepare a room for you. The East Tower is lovely this time of year. The roof leaks only when it rains, but it almost never rains here, so you should be fine. She looked back at Garrick. Except it's winter, and winter means snow, and snow melts. So I suppose the roof will leak constantly, but I'm sure your true mate is very resilient. Then she walked back inside. She made it all the way to the kitchen before her hands started shaking. Berta was waiting. Berta was always waiting. The old cook took one look at Aveline's face and said nothing, because Berta was the kind of woman who understood that sometimes the most compassionate thing you could do for someone was to simply witness their composure without testing it. I need to leave, Aveline said. Yes, my lady. Tonight? Yes, my lady. He'll try to keep me here, for appearances. The pack expects a proper transition of Luna status, and Garrick won't want the Northern Territories to think he discarded his Luna without cause. He'll want me to stay and smile and hand Lenora the household keys in some ridiculous ceremony so it all looks civilized. Then we don't give him the chance. No, we don't. Aveline's mind was already working. She had always been like this. She felt things deeply, but processed them practically. Heartbreak could wait. Logistics could not. I'm taking the ledgers, she said. The household ledgers? All of them. 9 years of accounts, grain contracts, trade agreements, mine yields, border patrol rotations, and the tax reconciliation files. I wrote them. I organized them. They're in my handwriting because no one else in this keep bothered to learn double-entry bookkeeping. Without those ledgers, Garrick won't know how much grain is stored, how much is owed to Goldenmere, or when the next shipment of iron is due. Berta stared at her. Then a slow, magnificent grin spread across the cook's weathered face. You brilliant girl. Also, I'm taking the spice cabinet. The saffron alone is worth more than Lenora's horse. I purchased every ounce of it with my personal dowry funds. It's mine. Berta laughed. It was a low, dangerous laugh, the laugh of a woman who had survived 3 husbands and trusted none of them. What else? Aveline considered. My mother's silver, my books. The winter medicine stores, I compounded them myself, so they're mine, and the cheese. The cheese? The aged Firewolf cheese in the cold cellar. 42 wheels. I spent 3 years perfecting that recipe. Garrick doesn't even like cheese. He won't miss it until his new Luna tries to host a feast and realizes there's nothing in the larder but salted pork and regret. By evening, Aveline had packed 14 crates. She had done it quietly, efficiently, with the help of Berta and 2 kitchen maids who had volunteered without being asked, because it turned out that the household staff had opinions about Garrick's romantic decisions, and none of those opinions were favorable. The problem was leaving. Ashenmore Keep sat on a rocky plateau surrounded by pine forest on 3 sides and a sheer cliff drop on the 4th. The main gate was guarded. the postern gate was locked at sundown, and Garrick, for all his emotional failures, was not stupid. He would expect her to try to leave, and he would have instructed the guards to prevent it, not out of love, but because a discarded Luna wandering the northern roads was politically inconvenient. Aveline was standing at the kitchen window, considering her options, when she heard the noise. It came from the old granary behind the keep, a low, rumbling sound, half growl and half whimper. She knew that sound. She had heard it before, on border patrols, in the deep forests. It was the sound of a wolf. Not a shifter wolf, not a pack wolf, but a real wolf, a wild one. She should not have gone to investigate. She had 14 crates to move, a keep to escape, and a rapidly narrowing window of time before Garrick decided to summon her for whatever humiliating conversation he was surely planning. But the sound was wrong. It was pain-wrong, and Aveline had never been able to walk away from pain-wrong sounds, which was how she had ended up married to Garrick in the first place, because 9 years ago she had heard a wounded soldier howling in the rain and had gone to help him, and the wounded soldier had turned out to be the most handsome alpha she had ever seen, and he had looked at her like she was the only warm thing in a cold world, and she had loved him. She had loved him so much. She went to the granary. The wolf was silver, not gray, not pale. Silver, like moonlight, had been hammered into fur. It was enormous, easily twice the size of a natural wolf, with eyes that shone the pale blue of glacier ice. It was also very clearly injured. Its left hind leg was caught in an old iron trap, one of the cruel, spring-loaded things that Garrick's father had set decades ago, and no one had bothered to remove. The wolf snarled when it saw her. "I know," Aveline said. "I wouldn't trust me either. Everything in this keep has terrible judgment." She approached slowly. She had done this before, not with wolves this large, but with injured animals in the forest. The key was to make yourself boring, unthreatening, the kind of creature that clearly did not have the ambition to be a predator. "I'm going to look at that trap," she said, keeping her voice level. "And then I'm going to open it, and then you're going to not bite my hand off because I need my hands. I have 14 crates of cheese and spices to load onto a cart tonight, and it's really hard to drive a cart with stumps." The wolf watched her. Its ice blue eyes tracked her every movement with an intelligence that was not entirely animal. Aveline knelt beside the trap. It was rusted, but still brutally functional. The iron jaws had bitten deep enough to draw blood, but not deep enough to break bone. She studied the mechanism. She knew these traps. She had spent her first year as Luna systematically disarming them across Blackmere territory because she thought they were barbaric, and Garrick had let her because it had not seemed important enough to argue about. "This is going to hurt," she told the wolf. "I'm sorry." She pressed the release lever with both hands. The jaws opened. The wolf yelped, a sound that was far too dignified to be called a yelp, but there was no other word for it, and yanked its leg free. Then it just sat there, looking at her. "You're welcome," Aveline said. "Now please go away. I have a dramatic escape to execute, and I don't have time for a wildlife encounter." The wolf did not go away. It licked its injured paw, then stood, testing its weight. It limped, but it walked. It looked at Aveline with those impossible glacier eyes, and then it looked at the keep, and then it looked back at Aveline. Then it lay down across the granary doorway. "You're not helping." It yawned. Its teeth were very large. "Fine, guard the door. That's useful. I'm going to go be publicly humiliated now, and then I'm going to steal my own cheese and leave. If anyone asks, you didn't see me." She left the wolf in the granary. She had larger problems. The summons came at dusk. A servant, not one of the loyal kitchen staff, but one of Garrick's personal attendants, a thin man named Harwick, who had the personality of a damp sock, knocked on Aveline's chamber door and informed her that the Alpha required her presence in the Great Hall. "Required," Aveline repeated. "His word, my lady." Of course it was. She dressed carefully. Not in the plain wool she usually wore for kitchen work, but in the one fine gown she owned, deep midnight blue with silver thread at the cuffs, the gown she had sewn herself for last winter's solstice feast. She braided her dark auburn hair and pinned it with her mother's silver combs. She did not do this for Garrick. She did it for herself, because she understood that in the next hour, her dignity was going to be tested, and dignity was easier to maintain when you felt like you looked like someone who deserved it. The Great Hall of Ashenmore Keep was a massive stone room with a vaulted ceiling supported by pillars carved to look like wolves standing on their hind legs. Garrick sat in the Alpha's chair on the raised dais at the far end, and Lenora sat beside him in a smaller chair that had been hastily draped with white silk. That chair had been Aveline's. She had sat in it for 9 years. She walked the length of the hall. Every step echoed. The pack was assembled, warriors, elders, household staff. They watched her with expressions ranging from sympathy to discomfort to the specific blank-faced neutrality of people who knew something was wrong, but were not personally willing to do anything about it. "Aveline," Garrick said, and he had the decency to look uncomfortable, though whether that was actual guilt or just the social inconvenience of explaining to a room full of people why he had replaced a perfectly functional wife, she could not tell. "Please sit." There was no chair for her. "Where?" she asked. The silence was surgical. Garrick's beta, a barrel-shaped man named Griff, who had the emotional intelligence of a fence post but at least the honesty of one, shifted his weight and muttered something that might have been a curse. "A chair," Garrick snapped at a servant. "Bring a chair." They brought a chair, a small wooden one, the kind used by scribes, and they set it below the dais, not on the platform. Below it. Below Garrick. Below Lenora. Aveline looked at the chair. She looked at Garrick. She did not sit. "You have something to say to me," she said. "Say it standing." A low male voice came from the Western delegation near the rear doors. "Then standing is the only honest position left in this hall." Aveline turned. 12 riders in silver-edged cloaks stood beneath the carved wolf pillars, road dust still whitening their boots. At their center was a black-haired man in a closed black coat, taller than Garrick and unnervingly still. He wore no crown and no pack crest, only a narrow silver clasp shaped like a wolf fang. He had arrived at noon as a Western road envoy, and until that moment he had said nothing. Garrick's expression hardened. "This is a private pack matter." "You summoned the full household, 2 visiting lords and foreign witnesses," the stranger replied. His pale eyes moved once to the scribe's stool below the dais, then returned to Aveline. "It stopped being private when you removed your Luna's chair." He did not step in front of her. He did not offer to speak for her. He merely stayed where she could see him, a silent witness whose attention held no pity. For the first time that evening, Aveline felt observed without feeling diminished. Garrick's jaw worked. She knew that look. It was the look he got when reality was not performing according to his expectations. "The bond between Lenora and me is a true mate bond," he said. "It cannot be denied. Pack law recognizes." "I know what pack law recognizes, Garrick. I rewrote half of it. That a true mate bond supersedes a ceremonial marriage. When confirmed by the Pack Elder Council, witnessed by 3 neutral alphas, and recorded in the Sovereignty Ledger, which I also maintain, none of which has happened." Garrick's eyes narrowed. "It will happen." "Then let it happen properly. But you didn't call me here to discuss procedure, did you?" Lenora leaned forward. She had changed into a white gown embroidered with gold, probably from the Keep's own textile stores, which Aveline had stocked herself. And she had the expression of someone who was trying very hard to appear gracious, and was mostly just appearing nervous. "Lady Ashwood," Lenora said, "I want you to know that I never intended to." "To what? Take my husband? Take my title? Take my chair?" "I know this must be painful. What's painful is that you're wearing a gown made from fabric I imported from the Southern weavers at a rate of 12 silver marks per bolt, and you've cut the hem crooked." Lenora looked down at her hem. It was in fact crooked. Aveline turned back to Garrick. "What are your terms?" "You'll be given quarters in the East Tower. The tower with the leaking roof. And you'll retain the courtesy title of Lady Ashwood." How generous, a leaking tower and a fake name. And you'll participate in the formal transition ceremony where you'll transfer the Luna Seal to Lenora in front of the pack. The Luna Seal. It was a medallion of dark iron, stamped with the Blackmere wolf, worn by every Luna of the pack for generations. Aveline had worn it for 9 years. She reached up and touched it now, feeling the cool metal against her collarbone. You want me to hand my seal to this girl, in public, and smile. I want you to do it with grace, Aveline. You've always had grace. Grace, she repeated. You want me to have grace. She looked at him, at this man she had loved since she was 22, this man whose nightmares she had soothed, whose wounds she had stitched, whose household she had held together with nothing but stubbornness and double-entry bookkeeping. She looked at the silver in his eyes and remembered when those eyes had looked at her like she was the only thing worth seeing. All right, she said. When is the ceremony? 3 days. 3 days. Fine. She paused. But Garrick? Yes. You should know that I've taken the household ledgers. The room shifted. Garrick's expression changed. All of them, she continued. Grain stores, trade contracts, mine yields, tax reconciliations, patrol rotations, every record of how this keep functions. I wrote them. They're mine. Aveline. Also the spice cabinet and the aged Firewolf cheese. 42 wheels. I'd say I'm sorry, but I spent 3 years perfecting that recipe while you were off deciding which wars to start, so I'm not even a little bit sorry. Griff, the beta, made a choking sound that might have been a laugh. He turned it into a cough. You can't take the ledgers, Garrick said, standing. Those are pack property. They're written in my personal cipher. Nobody else can read them, which means they're either my property or they're very expensive kindling. Your choice. Lenora looked between them with the expression of someone who had just realized that the fairy tale she had walked into had footnotes she had not read. I'll give you the ledger cipher key, Aveline said. When I am released from this marriage with my full dowry restored, my mother's silver returned, and a formal letter of good standing signed by you and witnessed by 3 neutral alphas. Until then, I hope Lenora is good at arithmetic, because winter tax season starts in 6 weeks, and the northern mines will want their yield reports. She turned and walked out of the great hall. Behind her, she heard Garrick say, Aveline, and she did not stop. She did not stop until she reached the granary, where the silver wolf was still lying across the doorway, and then she sat down on an overturned bucket, and she pressed her hands over her face, and she breathed. The wolf lifted its head and watched her. Don't look at me like that, she said, her voice cracking exactly once. I'm fine. The wolf stood. It limped over to her on its injured paw and pressed its enormous silver head against her knee. Its fur was surprisingly warm. It smelled like pine sap and cold stone, and something else, something sharp and electric, like the air before a lightning strike. She put her hand on the wolf's head. She did not cry. But she sat there for a long time, with her hand on a wild animal's silver fur, and she breathed, and she planned. 3 days, Garrick had said. She would be gone in 1. The escape happened at the 3rd bell past midnight. Berta had arranged a cart. Not one of the fine ones from the Keep's carriage house, but a sturdy farm cart from the village below, driven by Berta's nephew Tam, a lanky 19-year-old with perpetually startled hair and the useful quality of asking no questions about anything ever. Where are we going? Tam asked. South, Aveline said. How far south? Far enough that Garrick Blackmere's name is a boring fact and not a present danger. That's very far south. Then I hope this horse is well rested. They loaded the crates in silence. 14 crates of ledgers, spices, medicine, cheese, silver, and books. Everything Aveline owned, everything she had earned. Her entire life in Ashenmore. Keep reduced to what could fit on a farm cart. The silver wolf appeared as they were finishing. It materialized from the tree line like a patch of moonlight that had decided to go for a walk, and it sat at the edge of the clearing and watched them with those glacier blue eyes. "No," Aveline said. The wolf tilted its head. "I am not adopting a wild wolf. I have enough problems." The wolf stood up and walked to the cart and lay down underneath it. "That's not, you can't just—" Tam looked at the wolf, looked at Aveline. "It seems decided, my lady." "It's a wild animal." "It seems like a decided wild animal." They left. The postern gate had been locked, as Aveline had expected, but Berta had one final gift: the key. She had taken it from Harwick's belt while he was eating supper, because Berta had the hands of a pickpocket and the moral flexibility of a woman who had watched her mistress be humiliated in front of 50 people. "Go," Berta said, pressing the key into Aveline's hand. "Don't stop until you're past the river crossing, and don't come back for that man, not if he begs on both knees." "Berta, don't you dare cry, not for him. You cry when you're somewhere warm and safe and eating your own cheese, and not a moment before." Aveline hugged her. Berta was not a hugger. She tolerated the embrace the way she tolerated overcooked meat, with stiff disapproval and a faint tremor that suggested hidden emotion, but she hugged Aveline back. "Go," she said again. They went. The cart rattled down the mountain road in the dark. Tam drove. Aveline sat beside him, wrapped in her cloak, the Luna seal still around her neck. She had considered leaving it. She had held it in her hand and looked at it, and thought about setting it on Garrick's pillow with a note that said something cutting and memorable. But she did not leave it, not because she wanted to keep it, but because she had earned it, and she was done leaving behind things she had earned. The silver wolf trotted alongside the cart. Its limp was improving. In the moonlight, its fur shone like liquid metal, and its glacier eyes caught every shadow, every movement, every rustle in the dark pines. It moved with the particular alertness of an animal that was not following, it was escorting. They traveled south for 3 days. On the first day, they crossed the Blackmere border into unclaimed territory, the vast, lawless stretch of pine forests and rocky valleys between the northern wolf packs and the Silver Reaches. Tam drove the cart with the grim determination of a young man who had been raised by Berta and therefore feared nothing in the known world except his aunt's displeasure. Aveline navigated from memory because she had spent years studying the maps in Ashenmore Keep's library, while Garrick had been too busy being alpha to notice that his wife had memorized every road, river, and border crossing in the Northern Territories. On the second day, they ran into bandits. There were 5 of them. They emerged from the trees at a narrow point in the road where the pines pressed close and the cart could not turn around. They were the usual sort, rough, unwashed, armed with short swords, and the misplaced confidence of men who had never met a woman who could lift a grain sack over her head with one arm. Aveline could lift a grain sack over her head with one arm. "Off the cart," the lead bandit said. He was missing 2 teeth and most of his charm. "Leave the cargo." Aveline looked at him. She looked at the cart full of her possessions. She looked at the wheel of Firewolf cheese that was sitting on top of the nearest crate, aged to perfection, worth approximately 40 silver marks at market. "No," she said. The bandit blinked. "That wasn't a request." "I know. My answer is still no." The silver wolf, which had been trotting ahead of the cart, came back. It walked out of the trees with the silent, deliberate gait of a predator that had been politely waiting for an excuse. It was enormous in the daylight, shoulder height to a man's chest, teeth like ivory daggers, glacier eyes fixed on the lead bandit with the focused intensity of a creature that had already done the math and decided that 5 against 1 was unfair, but only for the 5. The bandits looked at the wolf. The wolf looked at the bandits. The lead bandit looked at Aveline. "Is that yours?" "I really couldn't say. It followed me home. I think it likes cheese." The wolf growled. It was not a dramatic growl. It was a low, continuous rumble like a mountain clearing its throat before an avalanche. The sound vibrated in the bones. The bandits left. They did not run, they were too proud for that, but they walked very quickly in the opposite direction, which was essentially the same thing with better posture. Tam exhaled. "My lady, your wolf just scared off 5 armed men." "It's not my wolf." The wolf walked back to the cart and lay down underneath it again. "It seems like your wolf." On the 3rd day, they reached Brindlewood. Brindlewood was not a town so much as a collection of buildings that had agreed to stand near each other. A trading post, a blacksmith, a tavern called the Crooked Antler, and a scattering of stone cottages clinging to the hillside like determined barnacles. It sat at the crossroads where the northern road met the old King's Highway, and it was the kind of place where people came to disappear. Aveline did not intend to disappear. She intended to regroup, resupply, and formulate a plan that extended beyond go south. But first, she needed information, and information lived in taverns. The Crooked Antler was warm, dim, and smelled of wood smoke and spilled ale. The proprietress was a tall, sharp-faced woman named Marin, who had the look of someone who had seen everything and was disappointed by most of it. "Looking for a room?" Marin asked, wiping down the bar with a cloth that had probably been white sometime during the previous century. "Looking for news," Aveline said. "What's happening in the territories? Any major pack movements?" Marin studied her. Aveline was still wearing her midnight blue gown, travel-stained now, and her mother's silver combs, and the Luna seal around her neck. She did not look like a refugee. She looked like a Luna who had decided to go for a very long walk. "You're from Blackmere," Marin said. "I was." "Heard something about that? Alpha Blackmere took a new Luna?" "News travels fast. Merchants talk, especially when they're drunk." Marin leaned on the bar. "Lot of unrest in the territories right now. The Silver Reaches have been quiet for years, but the new Silver Wolf King took his throne about 2 years back. He's been consolidating the western packs. Rumor is he's building something. Army, alliance, nobody knows. But the northern alphas are nervous, Blackmere included." "The Silver Wolf King," Aveline repeated. She had heard the title. Everyone had. The Silver Reaches were a vast territory to the west, historically fractured, historically weak. But 2 years ago, a new king had emerged. A wolf of unknown lineage who had united the Western Pacts through a combination of military brilliance, political cunning, and what the rumors described as an unsettling amount of personal charisma. Nobody knew much about him. He did not attend councils. He did not send emissaries to social functions. He was, by all accounts, a ghost who happened to command the largest wolf army west of the mountains. "The Silver Wolf King doesn't concern me," Aveline said. "I need to find work, something that uses organizational skills and an extremely detailed knowledge of northern trade routes." Marin raised an eyebrow. "You're a bookkeeper?" "I'm a Luna who ran a keep for 9 years. I can do accounts, negotiate trade contracts, manage provision routes, mediate territorial disputes, compound medicines, bake bread, and disarm iron traps. I can also lift a grain sack over my head with one arm, but I prefer to lead with the bookkeeping." Marin smiled. It was a thin, surprised smile, the smile of a woman who had not expected to be impressed and was annoyed at herself for it. "There's a position," she said. "Not here, north of here, actually. The border garrison at Thornwall, it's a neutral outpost, sits right on the line between unclaimed territory and the Silver Reaches. They need a quartermaster. The last one embezzled the supply funds and ran off with a traveling bard." A quartermaster position at a border garrison. It's not glamorous, but it's legitimate work, and the garrison commander doesn't care about pack politics. They just need someone who can count barrels and not steal from them. Aveline considered. A border garrison was not where she had imagined ending up, but it was work. It was far from Ashenmore, and it was the kind of position where her skills would actually be valued rather than taken for granted. "I'll take it," she said. "You haven't even asked about the pay. Does it come with quarters that don't have a leaking roof?" "Stone cottage, dry, comes with a fireplace." "Then I'll take it." She left Brindlewood the next morning with Tam, the cart, and the silver wolf. Hayes had spent the night beneath the tavern eaves, waking at every wagon wheel an unfamiliar scent. At sunrise it rose, shook frost from its coat, and followed the cart without invitation. The road to Thornwall wound through increasingly wild terrain. The pines grew taller, the valleys grew deeper. The air tasted of snow and granite, and the particular silence that came from being very far away from anyone who might help you. It was on this road that Aveline met the black-haired Western witness from Ashenmore again. He stepped from the pines alone this time, without the 12 silver-cloaked riders who had stood behind him in the Great Hall. Aveline recognized the disciplined stillness before she recognized his face. Men did not walk alone in the borderlands unless they were foolish or dangerous, and nothing about him suggested foolishness. His pale eyes took in the farm cart, the travel-stained gown, the 14 crates, and the silver wolf pacing beside her horse. "You left before dawn," he said. "You watched my husband remove my chair and said almost nothing. You did not need a stranger to win the argument for you." His gaze stayed level with hers. "You needed someone powerful enough to remember exactly what they did after everyone else decided it was more convenient to forget." The answer should have irritated her. Instead, it settled somewhere uncomfortably close to relief. Then he glanced at the horse and his expression sharpened. Aveline blinked. He was beautiful, not handsome in the way Garrick was handsome, sharp and aggressive and designed to impress. This man was beautiful the way a storm was beautiful, the way a blade was beautiful, the way something dangerous was beautiful, precisely because it did not care whether you found it beautiful or not. His eyes were pale gray, almost silver, set in a face with cheekbones that could have been carved by a sculptor who was showing off. He wore dark leather and fur, practical, well-made, but not ornamental. No insignia, no pack markings, nothing to identify him. He stopped in the middle of the road and looked at the cart. Then he looked at Aveline. Then he looked at the silver wolf, which had been trotting beside the cart and was now standing very still, its glacier eyes fixed on the stranger with an expression that Aveline could not read. The wolf did not growl. It did not snarl. It did not flatten its ears or bare its teeth. It simply stood there and looked at the man, and the man looked back at it, and something passed between them that Aveline did not understand. Then the man looked at her again. "Your horse is about to throw a shoe," he said. His voice was low and quiet, the kind of voice that did not need volume because it had weight, the kind of voice that entered a room and made other voices seem optional. Aveline looked at the horse. The right front shoe was indeed loose, the nails were bending, and the shoe was shifting with each step. She had not noticed. She should have noticed. She was better than this. "Thank you," she said. "I'll fix it at the next stop." "The next stop is Thornwall. That's 4 miles uphill. Your horse won't make it 4 miles on a loose shoe on this terrain." "Then I'll fix it here." She climbed down from the cart. She had tools, a basic farrier kit that Berta had packed because Berta thought of everything. She knelt beside the horse and examined the shoe. The nails were bent, the shoe was warped, and the hoof needed trimming. It was a 20-minute job if you knew what you were doing. Aveline knew what she was doing. She had learned farriery during the grain famine when the keep's blacksmith had died of river fever and no one else had been willing to learn. The stranger watched her. He did not offer to help. Most men would have. Most men would have shouldered in and taken the tools from her hands and done the job themselves because most men assumed that a woman kneeling beside a horse was a woman who needed rescuing. This man simply leaned against a tree and watched her with those pale silver eyes, and the thing she felt from him was not condescension, it was interest. "You're good at that," he said, after she had removed the warped shoe and begun trimming the hoof. "I'm good at most things." "That's not arrogance. That's inventory." She looked up at him. He was not smiling, but there was something at the corner of his mouth. Not quite amusement, not quite warmth, but something that lived in the neighborhood of both. "Who are you?" she asked. "A traveler. Travelers don't walk alone in the borderlands." Some do. Stupid ones. You're traveling with a farm cart, a boy, and a wolf. I wouldn't call that a full military escort. The wolf is very intimidating. He looked at the wolf. The wolf was currently lying on its side in a patch of sunlight, its injured paw in the air, its tongue hanging out. It looked approximately as intimidating as a large silver throw pillow. Terrifying, the man said. Aveline felt her mouth twitch. She pressed it down. She was not in the mood to find strange men in the forest amusing. She had recently been replaced by a 23-year-old with a crooked hem, and her sense of humor was on temporary leave. She finished the hoof, fitted a spare shoe from the farrier kit, and nailed it into place. It was not her best work. She did not have a proper anvil, but it would hold to Thornwall. "Thank you for the warning about the shoe," she said, standing and brushing off her skirts. "You're going to Thornwall?" "I am." "The garrison?" "The garrison." He was quiet for a moment. Those pale eyes studied her. Not the way Garrick had studied her, which was the way a man studied something he owned, but the way a cartographer studied a coastline, with attention and a certain careful distance. "The road forks in half a mile," he said. "Take the left fork. The right one looks shorter, but crosses a washout that'll break your axle." "How do you know this road so well?" "I walk it." "Alone?" "Alone." She looked at him, and he looked at her, and there was a moment, a brief, electric moment like the air before a lightning strike when something shifted. She did not know what it was. She only knew that this man was looking at her like she was not a discarded Luna, not a woman who had been replaced, not a problem to be managed or a chair to be removed from a dais. He was looking at her like she was a person who had just reshot a horse in the middle of nowhere, and that was interesting. "Thank you," she said again, "for the road advice." He inclined his head, just slightly, a nod of respect, not of dismissal. Then he turned and walked back into the forest, and the trees closed behind him like a curtain, and he was gone. Tam stared after him. "My lady, who was that?" "I don't know." "He was very tall." "Yes." "And very intense." "Yes." "Do you think he was dangerous?" Aveline considered this. The silver wolf had stood up from its sunlit nap and was staring into the trees where the man had disappeared. Its tail was not tucked. Its ears were not flattened. If anything, it looked almost expectant. "Yes," Aveline said. "I think he was very dangerous, and I think he was very polite about it." Thornwall Garrison was built into the side of a cliff. It was not a beautiful building. It was a practical building. Thick stone walls, narrow windows, a heavy iron gate, and the general aesthetic of a structure that had been designed by someone who expected to be attacked and wanted the building to look disappointed about it in advance. The garrison commander was a woman named Captain Lyra Dane, who was, Aveline did a quick calculation, probably no older than 35, but looked like she had personally wrestled every one of those years and won. She was short, muscular, with close-cropped dark hair and a scar across her left cheekbone that she wore with the casual indifference of someone who had more interesting things to think about than her own face. "You're the new quartermaster?" Lyra said, looking Aveline up and down. "I am." "You look like a Luna." "I was." "Blackmere?" "Does everyone know?" "Merchant gossip. It's the only entertainment out here." Lyra gestured at the garrison. "This is Thornwall. We have 40 soldiers, a storage problem, a provision route that hasn't worked properly since the last quartermaster stole everything, and a strategic position on the border of the Silver Reaches that makes us either very important or very expendable, depending on who you ask." "Who do you ask?" "I try not to ask anyone anything. It's easier that way." Lyra looked at the cart. "Is that cheese?" 42 wheels of aged Firewolf cheese. "Firewolf cheese!" "I made it myself." Lyra's expression shifted from professional assessment to something that looked dangerously close to hope. "Can you cook?" "I can do many things. but I'm here to be your quartermaster, not your chef. Can you be both? Captain Voss, I can be whatever this garrison needs me to be, as long as I am paid fairly, housed in quarters with a roof that does not leak, and never, under any circumstances, asked to hand my professional accomplishments to a younger woman while smiling. Lyra blinked, then she laughed. It was a short, sharp laugh, the laugh of someone who did not laugh often and was surprised to find herself doing it. Welcome to Thornwall, Lady Ashwood. Aveline, just Aveline. Welcome to Thornwall, Aveline. Your quarters are in the East Wing. The roof doesn't leak, the fireplace works, and if you can fix our provision route, I'll personally fight anyone who bothers you. Aveline moved in. The stone cottage attached to the East Wing was small but solid, a single room with a fireplace, a bed with an actual mattress, a desk, and a window that overlooked the valley below. She unpacked her crates with the systematic efficiency of a woman who had done this before and intended to do it only one more time because the next place she unpacked would be permanent. The silver wolf followed her into the cottage, sniffed every corner with great thoroughness, and then lay down in front of the fireplace and fell asleep. You live here now, Aveline said to the wolf. Apparently. The wolf's tail thumped once against the stone floor. She named it Haze because its silver fur blurred against morning mist. She did not pretend it was tame. It slept near the door rather than the hearth, woke at every unfamiliar scent, and left for hours to range the tree line before returning on its own terms. Tam stopped calling it a pet after Haze ignored him for an entire day and then stole only the strip of meat he had been saving for himself. Very wild, Tam said, extremely untamed. Shut up, Tam. Aveline threw herself into the quartermaster work with the single-minded intensity of a woman who needed to not think about her ex-husband. The garrison's supply situation was, as Lyra had warned, catastrophic. The previous quartermaster had embezzled roughly 60% of the supply budget, falsified the inventory records, and left behind a filing system that appeared to have been organized by a drunk badger. This is chaos, Aveline said, staring at a ledger that listed 40 barrels of salt in storage. The actual storage room contained 6 barrels of salt, 2 barrels of what might once have been salt but was now a mysterious gray substance, and a family of mice. Welcome to my life, Lyra said. How have you been feeding 40 soldiers? Badly, and with a lot of hunting. My soldiers eat more venison than any garrison in the territories. They're starting to dream about deer. That ends now. Aveline rolled up her sleeves. I need access to the garrison's trade accounts, your existing supplier contracts. If any survived the embezzlement, the regional merchant registry, and a complete physical inventory of every storage room, cellar, and closet in this building. Lyra stared at her. You want to inventory every closet? I once found 14 pounds of missing saffron in a broom cupboard in Ashenmore Keep. You would be amazed at what people hide in closets. Within a week, Aveline had rebuilt the inventory system from scratch. Within 2 weeks, she had renegotiated 3 supplier contracts, secured a new grain source from a farming community 2 valleys south, and discovered that the garrison's armory budget had been paying for a subscription to a traveling theater troupe that the previous quartermaster had apparently been very fond of. A theater troupe, Lyra said flatly. The Wandering Wolves. They perform romantic ballads and dramatic reenactments of famous pack battles. Your former quartermaster was paying them 12 silver marks a month to perform private shows. Private shows. In the supply cellar, which explains why the cellar always smelled like stage makeup. Lyra pressed her hands over her face. I am going to find that man, and I am going to make him eat every script. The garrison soldiers, who had been surviving on venison and suspicion, responded to Aveline's arrival with the cautious optimism of people who had been disappointed before, but were willing to try hope one more time. She reorganized the kitchen. She fixed the bread oven, which had a cracked firebox that no one had bothered to repair because no one had bothered to bake bread. She introduced the Firewolf cheese, which caused a minor sensation. The soldiers had never tasted anything like it, and one of them, a young woman named Petra, who was built like a siege engine and had the most infectious laugh in the garrison, actually cried. This is the best thing I've ever eaten, Petra said, tears streaming down her face. It's cheese, Aveline said. It's the best cheese. It's cheese that understands me. Petra became Aveline's first real friend at Thornwall. She was 24, the daughter of a blacksmith from the Eastern Valleys, and she had joined the garrison because, in her words, I wanted to hit things professionally, and the garrison was hiring. She was loud, warm, fearless, and possessed of a laugh that could be heard 3 rooms away and made everyone in those 3 rooms feel better about their lives. The other person who attached herself to Aveline was Nessa, the garrison's healer, a quiet, precise woman of about 40 with steady hands, gray-streaked dark hair, and the particular calm of someone who had seen a lot of blood and had decided to respond to it with competence rather than panic. Nessa did not talk much, but when she did, every word counted, and she had a dry, understated humor that surfaced at unexpected moments like a fish in a still pond. Your wolf is in my herb garden again, Nessa said one morning, appearing at Aveline's door with the expression of a woman who was trying to be annoyed and failing. It's not my wolf. It ate my chamomile. Wolves don't eat chamomile. This one does. It also dug up my valerian root and rolled in it. My entire herb garden smells like a wolf who is having a very relaxing day. Hayes adjusted to the garrison without becoming a house animal. It slept where it could see both the door and the window, followed Aveline only when strangers entered, and patrolled the outer wall at dusk. Once it dug through Nessa's chamomile bed while tracking a vole and rolled in the crushed leaves afterward, smelling so strongly of herbs that even the sentries kept sneezing. Its protection was instinctive rather than obedient. It placed itself between Aveline and danger, but it did not wait for commands. 3 weeks after Aveline arrived at Thornwall, the stranger from the forest appeared again. She was in the garrison courtyard, arguing with a merchant about the price of lamp oil. The merchant wanted 6 silver marks per barrel, Aveline wanted 4, and they had been negotiating for 20 minutes with the intensity of 2 people who both knew the fair price was 5, but were too stubborn to say it first when she saw him. He was standing at the garrison gate. Just standing there, leaning against the stone wall with his arms crossed, watching her negotiate with an expression that was carefully, deliberately blank except for his eyes, which were not blank at all. Those pale silver eyes were watching her with a focus that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. He was dressed differently than before, still dark leather and fur, but cleaner, more deliberate, as if he had actually considered what to wear before leaving the house, which struck Aveline as unusual for a man who claimed to be a wandering traveler. 5 marks, the merchant said. 4.5. 5. 4.5, and I'll buy your entire stock of tallow candles at market rate. The merchant considered. Done. Aveline shook his hand, signed the purchase order, and turned to find the stranger standing approximately 6 feet behind her. He had moved from the gate to the courtyard without making a sound, which was either impressive or alarming and was probably both. You're good at that, he said. You said that last time, about the horseshoe. It was true last time. It's true now. Is there something I can help you with, traveler? I'm passing through. Thornwall is on my route. Your route to where? Various places. That's not an answer. It's the answer I have. Up close, in daylight, he was even more striking than she remembered. The angles of his face were sharp but not harsh. Strong jaw, straight nose, those impossible cheekbones. His hair was very black, cut short enough to be practical but long enough to look deliberate. And his eyes, pale gray, almost silver, almost the same color as Hayes's fur, which was a coincidence that Aveline noted and filed away. You found Thornwall then, he said. The left fork. The left fork. My axle survived. Thank you. Your wolf seems to like it here. He nodded toward Hayes, who was lying in a sunny spot near the well. The wolf lifted its head when the man looked at it, and again that strange, unreadable exchange passed between them. Not hostility, not fear, but something that looked almost like recognition. It's not my wolf, Aveline said. It's lying in the sun waiting for you to finish working so it can follow you back inside. It's your wolf. Are you an expert on wolf ownership? I have some experience. His mouth did that thing again, the almost something at the corner. Not a smile, the suggestion of a smile. The architectural plans for a smile that had been approved but not yet constructed. I didn't get your name last time, Aveline said. You didn't ask. I'm asking now. He was quiet for a moment. Evander. Evander. No family name? No pack? Just Evander. That's unusual. I'm an unusual person. Lyra appeared at the courtyard entrance, took one look at Evander, and stopped. Her hand went to her sword, not drawing it, but resting on the hilt in the casual way of a soldier who wanted everyone to know she was armed. Who's this? Lyra asked. A traveler, Aveline said, passing through. Lyra looked at Evander. Evander looked at Lyra. There was a moment of mutual assessment. Two people who were both very good at evaluating threats, sizing each other up with the professional efficiency of predators who had agreed not to fight but wanted to establish the terms. Travelers don't usually stand in my courtyard watching my quartermaster negotiate, Lyra said. Your quartermaster is very good at negotiating, Evander said. It's worth watching. Lyra's eyebrow went up. She looked at Aveline. Aveline looked at the sky. You can stay one night, Lyra said. There's a room in the guest wing. Meals are at the bell. Don't touch anything you're not supposed to touch. I wouldn't dream of it, Evander said, and for the first time his mouth actually curved into something that was undeniably, technically, a smile. It was a very small smile. It lasted approximately 2 seconds. And it was, Aveline thought with great annoyance, extremely effective. He stayed one night. He ate dinner in the mess hall with the soldiers, and he said very little, and he watched everything. And when Petra tried to engage him in a drinking contest, because Petra tried to engage everyone in a drinking contest, he declined politely and said, I don't drink with people who can clearly outdrink me. Petra beamed. I like him, she told Aveline. You like everyone. I like him specifically. He's got good eyes. He's got eyes. I don't know that they're good. They're good. Trust me. That man looks at you like you're the answer to a question he's been asking his whole life. Petra. I'm just saying. Please stop just saying. In the morning, Evander was gone. He had left before dawn, the guest room neatly arranged, the bed made with military precision. The only evidence he had been there at all was a small bundle left on the windowsill of Aveline's cottage. A bunch of dried wildflowers, the kind that grew only in the deep forests of the borderlands, tied with a strip of dark leather. There was no note. Aveline stared at the flowers for a very long time. Then she put them in a cup of water on her desk and went back to work, because she was a practical woman and she did not have time to develop feelings about mysterious strangers who left wildflowers on windowsills. She had provision routes to manage and a garrison to feed and 42 wheels of cheese to distribute before spring. Hayes sniffed the flowers and wagged its tail. Don't start, Aveline told the wolf. Evander came back. He came back a week later, then 5 days after that, then 4 days, then 3. Each time he appeared at the garrison gate like a man who happened to be passing through, and each time he stayed one night, and each time he watched Aveline with those pale silver eyes that saw everything and revealed nothing, and each time he left dried wildflowers on her windowsill. The second time, he helped her repair a broken supply cart. He worked beside her in easy silence, his hands steady and precise. And when she struggled with a stubborn bolt, he did not take the wrench from her. He simply braced the axle so she could get better leverage. And when the bolt finally gave way, he said, "That bolt didn't stand a chance," and she laughed before she could stop herself. The third time, he arrived during a rainstorm. The garrison was battened down, the soldiers huddled in the mess hall, and Evander appeared at the gate soaking wet with the calm demeanor of a man who had been rained on before and had decided it was not worth having an opinion about. Aveline gave him a blanket. He wrapped it around his shoulders and sat in her cottage while she made tea, and Hayes lay between them and sighed with the deep contentment of a wolf who was exactly where it wanted to be. "You're settling in," Evander said, looking around the cottage. She had made it hers. The desk covered in orderly ledgers, the shelf of medicine jars, the silver combs on the mantel, a wheel of Firewolf cheese aging on a rack in the corner. "I'm working," she corrected. "There's a difference?" "For me, there isn't. Work is the only thing I've ever had that no one could take away from me." She paused. She had not meant to say that. It had come out before she could stop it, the way truth sometimes did when you were warm and dry and sitting near someone whose silence felt safe. Evander looked at her. The firelight caught his face, softening those sharp angles, making his pale eyes look almost warm. "Someone tried to take everything from you," he said. "It was not a question. My husband replaced me with a younger woman and expected me to hand over my title with a smile. I took the cheese and the ledgers instead." "You took the ledgers?" "All of them, written in my personal cipher. Without them, he can't run the keep. He doesn't know how much grain is stored, what the trade contracts say, or when the taxes are due. I imagine it's very inconvenient for him." Evander stared at her, and then he did something Aveline had not seen him do before. He laughed. Not a small laugh, not a polite laugh. A real laugh, low and warm and startled out of him like a bird flushed from cover. It changed his entire face. It made him look younger, more open, almost vulnerable. "You stole his ledgers," he said. "You held his entire keep hostage with bookkeeping. And 42 wheels of cheese." "And 42 wheels of cheese." He was still laughing, quietly now, shaking his head. "You are not what I expected." "What did you expect?" He looked at her. The laughter had faded, but something remained, something warm and careful and very, very focused. "I didn't expect anything," he said. "That's the problem. I walked into that forest 3 weeks ago expecting nothing, and I found you fixing a horseshoe in the middle of nowhere with flour dust still on your sleeve. And I haven't been able to stop coming back." The air between them changed. Aveline felt it, a shift, a tightening, like the atmosphere before a storm. She was suddenly very aware of how close he was sitting, and how the firelight played across his hands, and how his voice had dropped to something quiet and private that felt like it was meant only for this room. "Evander." "I know," he said. "You're not ready. You've just had your world broken, and you're rebuilding, and the last thing you need is another man who thinks he knows what you want." He paused. "But I want you to know that I see you. Not what you were to him, not what you lost. You, the woman who stole her own cheese and ran." She could not speak. There was something lodged in her throat, not tears, not words, but something larger than both. Something that felt like being seen for the first time in 9 years. "I'm going to leave flowers on your windowsill again," he said. "And I'm going to come back, and I'm going to keep coming back. And you don't have to do anything about that. You don't have to feel anything about that. But I wanted you to know." He stood. He left the blanket folded neatly on the chair. He walked to the door. "Evander." He turned. "The flowers," she said. "I like the blue ones." Something moved in his eyes, something fierce and soft and barely controlled. He nodded, once, and then he left. The next time he came, the flowers on her windowsill were all blue. The news from Ashenmore arrived 6 weeks after Aveline's escape, carried by a merchant who had the look of a man who knew his gossip was valuable and intended to extract maximum ale in exchange for it. "Blackmere's a mess," the merchant announced to the Crooked Antler in Brindlewood, where Aveline happened to be purchasing supplies. "The new Luna can't manage the household. Grain stores are wrong, trade contracts are lapsing, the winter taxes are late, and the northern miners are threatening to withhold iron shipments because nobody can find the yield agreements." "How terrible," Aveline said, signing a purchase order for 60 pounds of salt. "The Alpha's furious. He's been tearing the keep apart looking for the old ledgers. Apparently they're written in some kind of code nobody can crack. A cipher. It's called a cipher. Whatever it is, The new Luna tried to reconstruct the accounts and got the grain totals so wrong that they accidentally ordered triple the usual wheat shipment and have nowhere to store it. There's wheat stacked in the Great Hall. Aveline allowed herself one small, precise smile. It was the smile of a woman who had spent 9 years being underestimated and was now watching the entirely predictable consequences of that underestimation unfold. Also, the merchant added, lowering his voice, word is Blackmere is looking for her. The old Luna. He's sent scouts south. The smile faded. He wants the ledgers? Aveline asked. He wants the ledgers. He wants the cipher key, and... The merchant hesitated. Some say he wants her back. Not as Luna. That ship sailed, what with the new mate bond and all, but as... I don't know. Steward? Advisor? The word people use is asset. Asset, Aveline repeated. His word, not mine. Asset. 9 years of marriage, and she was an asset. Like a horse. Like a trade contract. Like a very useful piece of furniture that you did not appreciate until someone moved it and you discovered that the floor underneath was scratched. She finished her purchases. She loaded them onto the cart. She drove back to Thornwall with her jaw set and her hands steady and her heart doing something complicated that she refused to examine. Garrick was looking for her. Garrick wanted his ledgers back. Garrick wanted his asset back. She was not going back. The first time Evander touched her, really touched her, not a brush of hands while passing tools, not the accidental contact of fingers around a teacup, was during the raid. It happened at night. Avalon woke to the sound of howling, not wolf howling, but the organized, tactical howling of a pack assault. Someone was attacking Thornwall. She was out of bed and dressed in 45 seconds. She had learned to dress quickly during border emergencies at Ashenmoor. Muscle memory from years of being the person who managed crises while Garrick managed glory. She grabbed her boots, her cloak, and the heavy iron poker from the fireplace. Because she did not have a sword, but she had arms that could lift grain sacks, and a poker was essentially a very angry stick. The courtyard was chaos. Soldiers were scrambling. Lyra was shouting orders with the controlled fury of a commander who had been dragged out of sleep and intended to make someone pay for it. And at the gate, dark shapes were pouring through. Wolves, shifted wolves, at least 20 of them, fast and organized and utterly silent, except for that coordinated howling. "Raiders!" Lyra shouted. "Northern Rogue Pack, form up!" They were not Blackmere wolves. Aveline could tell immediately. These were smaller, rangy, with the desperate look of a pack that had been pushed out of its territory and was attacking border garrisons for supplies. They were not there for conquest. They were there for the storerooms. The storerooms that Aveline had spent 6 weeks rebuilding. "Oh, absolutely not," she said. She ran for the supply building, not to hide, to protect. Those supplies represented 45 trade negotiations, 16 supplier contracts, 11 purchase orders, and one extremely contentious argument about lamp oil. She was not losing them to raiders. She got there ahead of the wolves. She slammed the door shut, braced it with a crossbeam, and positioned herself behind a stack of grain barrels with the iron poker raised, and she waited. 2 raiders hit the door, then 3. The crossbeam held, but the door was old and the wood was groaning. And then Evander was there. He appeared beside her. She did not see him arrive, did not hear him. He was simply suddenly there, as if the shadows had decided to take a specific and extremely competent shape. He had a sword, not a garrison sword, not a standard issue blade, a beautiful, lethal weapon with a silver pommel shaped like a wolf's head, the kind of sword that was made for one person and one person only. "Stay behind me," he said. "I have a poker." "I can see that. Stay behind me anyway." The door broke. 2 wolves came through, huge, snarling, teeth bared. Evander moved. He moved like water, like wind, like something that had been born fighting and had never found a reason to stop. The sword flashed silver in the dark, and the first wolf yelped and scrambled backward, a shallow cut across its shoulder. Not lethal, not cruel, just precise enough to say I can kill you, but I am choosing not to. The second wolf lunged, and Evander caught it by the scruff and threw it, through a full-grown shifted wolf, back through the door with one arm. One arm. Aveline stood there with her poker and thought, very clearly, oh. A third wolf came through a window. It landed on a stack of crates behind Aveline, and she did not think, she just swung. The poker connected with the wolf's shoulder, with a crack that she felt in her bones, and the wolf yelped and tumbled off the crates and scrambled for the broken window, and Aveline stood there breathing hard with the poker raised and iron in her blood. Evander looked at her. In the dark, his pale eyes were almost luminous, and there was something in his expression that she had never seen on a man's face before. Not surprise, not admiration, but something deeper, something that looked like recognition. Like he had been looking for something and had just found it. "You hit a shifted wolf with a fireplace poker," he said. "It was on my grain." "Your grain." "I negotiated that grain shipment for 3 days. I'm not losing it to a wolf with poor impulse control." The fight outside was ending. Lyra's soldiers had pushed the raiders back. Aveline could hear the howling fading into the forest. It was over. She was shaking. She always shook after, not during, never during, but after, when the emergency was handled and the adrenaline had nowhere to go. She gripped the poker and breathed and tried to steady herself. Evander sheathed his sword. He stepped close to her, not touching, not yet, just close. Close enough that she could feel the heat of him. Close enough that his presence was a wall between her and the cold dark outside. "You're shaking," he said. "I always shake after. It's fine. It stops." "Can I?" He hesitated. It was the first time she had heard him hesitate about anything. "Can I touch your hand?" She looked at him. In the dark supply room, surrounded by the grain she had negotiated and the cheese she had made, and the evidence of a life she was building with her own hands, she looked at this man who asked permission. "Yes," she said. He took her hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm, steady, careful. He did not squeeze. He did not pull her closer. He simply held her hand, and his thumb pressed against the inside of her wrist where her pulse was hammering, and he held steady until the shaking stopped. It took 3 minutes. She counted. "Thank you," she whispered. "You hit a wolf with a poker," he said. "You don't need to thank me for holding your hand. I'm thanking you for asking first." Something moved in his face, something raw and almost wounded, and she understood he was not used to being thanked for basic decency, which meant that somewhere in his life, basic decency had been rare, and that understanding made her chest hurt in a way she was not prepared for. He let go of her hand, slowly, like releasing something fragile. "I need to talk to Captain Voss about the garrison's defenses," he said, and his voice was steady again, controlled, the voice of a man who had feelings and kept them on a very short leash. Those raiders knew the layout. They knew where the supply rooms were. Someone told them. "You think there's a spy in the garrison?" "I think your supplies are too valuable for a random attack. Someone is targeting this garrison specifically." He paused. "And I think it might have something to do with the man who's looking for you." Garrick. The name hung in the air between them. "He wouldn't," Aveline said. But she heard the uncertainty in her own voice. "He sent scouts south. He wants his ledgers. And you're living in a garrison that's strategically positioned between his territory and the Silver Reaches." Evander's jaw tightened. "He doesn't need to send his own wolves. He just needs to make this place unsafe enough that you have nowhere to go except back to him." The thought settled into Aveline's stomach like cold iron. "I'm not going back," she said. "No," Evander said, "you're not." He said it with a quietness that was not a suggestion. It was a fact, a decision, a line drawn in the dirt with a silver sword. In the morning, Evander did not leave. He did not explain why. He simply appeared at the mess hall for breakfast, sat down across from Petra, who looked delighted, and ate his porridge with the calm, methodical efficiency of a man who had decided to stay and saw no reason to make a speech about it. Lyra cornered Aveline in the supply room. Your traveler is still here. I noticed. He fought off 3 shifted wolves single-handedly last night. One of my soldiers said he threw a full-grown wolf through a door with one arm. I was there. I saw it. Who is he? He says his name is Evander. That's not what I asked. Aveline looked at Lyra. I don't know who he is, but he fights like a king, moves like a shadow, carries a sword with a silver wolf pommel, and every time he shows up, my wolf acts like it's been waiting for him. Your wolf. The wolf that is not mine but lives in my cottage. Lyra was quiet for a moment. Then she said very carefully, Aveline, the Silver Wolf King. Nobody knows what he looks like. He doesn't attend councils. He doesn't send portraits. He's not the Silver Wolf King. He carries a silver wolf sword. He fights like a one-man army. He appears and disappears from the borderlands at will. And he seems very, very interested in a garrison that sits directly on the border of the Silver Reaches. He's not the Silver Wolf King, Aveline repeated, but something cold and electric was crawling up her spine because Lyra was very smart and Lyra was very rarely wrong. Ask him, Lyra said. And if he is? Then we're either very safe or very compromised, and I'd like to know which before I eat any more of his porridge. Aveline did not ask him. Not yet. She told herself she was waiting for the right moment. She told herself she needed more information. She told herself that a man's identity was his own business, and she was not the kind of woman who demanded answers she was not prepared to receive. The truth was that she was afraid. Not of Evander. She was not afraid of Evander. She was afraid that if she asked the question and got the answer she suspected, everything between them would change. It would stop being a woman and a man and wildflowers on a windowsill. It would become politics, territory, power, the same things that had destroyed her marriage. So she did not ask, and Evander stayed, and the days settled into a rhythm. He worked. That was the thing that surprised her most. He did not sit idle. He helped repair the garrison wall where the raiders had damaged it. He worked with Lyra on defensive strategies, and Lyra, who trusted no one, began to trust him, which was either a testament to his character or his charisma, or both. He trained with the soldiers in the mornings, and they were in awe of him because he fought with a speed and precision that was not natural, that was not normal, that was something other than human. And he was near Aveline, always near, not hovering, not intrusive, but present, a gravitational constant, a fixed point. When she worked in the supply rooms, he was nearby, helping lift crates she could have lifted herself but didn't mind sharing. When she negotiated with merchants, he stood at the edge of the courtyard and watched with those pale silver eyes and that almost smile. When she walked the garrison walls in the evening, looking out at the darkening forest and thinking about all the things she had lost and all the things she was gaining, he appeared beside her and stood in silence. And his silence was the most comforting thing she had ever known. "You're doing it again," she said one evening, standing on the wall walk with the wind pulling at her hair. "Doing what?" "Standing near me and being quiet and making me feel like everything is going to be fine." "Is that a complaint?" "It's an observation." "Would you prefer I stood far away and was loud and made you feel uncertain?" "I would prefer to know why a man who fights like a king and carries a silver wolf sword is spending his days repairing walls and lifting crates in a border garrison." He was quiet. The wind moved between them, carrying the scent of pine and snow and something electric. "Because you're here," he said. She turned to look at him. He was looking at the horizon, and his profile was sharp and beautiful against the darkening sky, and there was no pretense in his voice, no games, no calculation. Just the bare, undecorated truth of a man who had found where he wanted to be and was not interested in being anywhere else. "Evander, I know what you are going to ask." He turned to face her. The wind caught his black hair, and his eyes were silver in the fading light. "Whatever I tell you does not change this. I first saw you stand in a hall while a man tried to remove your place in front of everyone who depended on you. Then I found you in a forest fixing a horseshoe with 14 crates and no intention of surrendering. I have been unable to walk away from you since. Tell me. My name is Evander Argentus. I am the Silver Wolf King. The world did not shift. The wall did not crack. The sunset did not change. But Aveline felt the ground beneath her reorganize itself, felt the shape of the last 6 weeks reassemble into a new pattern, one that made more sense and less sense at the same time. The Silver Wolf King, the Ghost King, the man who had united the Western Pacts, who commanded the largest wolf army west of the mountains, who was rumored to be brilliant, ruthless, and completely unknown. He was standing on a wall walk in a border garrison, and he was looking at her like she was the only thing he had ever wanted, and he had been leaving wildflowers on her windowsill. How long had you known about me? Before Ashenmoor? Before the forest? How long? She asked. I heard about you 3 months ago, the Luna of Blackmere who ran the Northern Keep single-handedly, the woman who disarmed every trap in the territory, the Luna who was smarter than her alpha and never got credit for it. Your name was in every merchant report, every trade negotiation, every territorial briefing that crossed my desk. You came looking for me? I came looking for the woman in the reports. I didn't expect. He stopped. For the first time, his composure cracked, and underneath was something unguarded and almost desperate. I didn't expect you. What did you expect? A political strategist, a useful mind. His voice dropped. I did not expect the woman in those reports to make every title I carried feel less important than whether she trusted me. The air between them was charged. Aveline could feel her heartbeat in her throat, in her wrists, in the tips of her fingers. She could feel the heat of him, even though they were not touching, even though there were 6 inches of cold air between them that felt like nothing at all. The wolf, she said. Hayes, that's one of yours. That's my scout, my best scout. I sent it ahead to watch the borderlands. It found you instead. It got caught in a trap. I know. It told me. It told you? Pack bond. Not words, impressions, images. It sent me the image of a woman with flower on her sleeve and steady hands who opened an iron trap and told a wolf not to bite her because she had cheese to steal. Aveline stared at him. That's when I came to find you, he said. Not for the reports, not for the politics. Because my wolf sent me a picture of a woman who talked to wild animals like they were mildly inconvenient fellow stewards, and I needed to know who she was. Something broke open inside her. Not pain, something warmer, something that had been locked away so long she had forgotten what it felt like. It felt like being chosen, not because she was useful, not because she was convenient, because she was herself, flower-dusted, poker-wielding, cheese-stealing, ledger-ciphering herself, and that was enough. Say something, Evander said, and there was a raw edge to his voice that she had never heard before. The Silver Wolf King, the Ghost King, the man who commanded armies, was standing in front of her asking her to say something, and he looked terrified. She reached up. She put her hand on his jaw. His skin was warm under her fingers, and she felt him go perfectly, absolutely still. Not frozen, but held like a breath waiting to be released. The blue wildflowers, she said. Where do they grow? He blinked. Whatever he had expected her to say, that was not it. In the silver reaches, in the highland meadows, they grow wild above the tree line. You rode to the silver reaches to pick me flowers. I ride 2 days each way, yes. Every time? Every time. She stood on her toes. She was tall, but he was taller, so much taller. And she had to stretch, and her hand slid from his jaw to the back of his neck, and she felt his pulse hammering under her fingertips. She kissed him. It was not a gentle kiss. It was not careful. It was the kiss of a woman who had spent 9 years being gentle and careful and getting nothing for it, and she was done being gentle. She kissed him like she meant it, and he made a sound, a low, broken sound, and his hands came up to her waist, and he pulled her against him, and his arms were strong, and his mouth was warm, and the wind whipped around them on the wall walk, and she did not feel cold at all. When she pulled back, his eyes were dark. Not pale silver anymore. Dark, like storm clouds, like something had been unleashed behind them that he could barely control. "Aveline," he said, and her name in his mouth sounded like a prayer and a curse at the same time. "I just kissed the Silver Wolf King on a wall walk in front of possibly the entire garrison," she said. "So I suppose the secret is out." "I don't care. Lyra is going to say she told me so." "I don't care. Petra is going to make this into a ballad." "I really don't care." He kissed her again. This time it was slower, deliberate, thorough. The kiss of a man who had been thinking about this for weeks and intended to be comprehensive. His hand came up to cup the side of her face, and his thumb traced her cheekbone, and he kissed her like she was something precious that he was afraid of breaking and determined to hold. Below the wall, Petra's voice carried up with perfect clarity. "I knew it." They broke apart. Aveline buried her face in Evander's shoulder and laughed. Really laughed, the first real laugh she had felt in months. And Evander's arms tightened around her, and his chin rested on top of her head, and she could feel his chest vibrating with a laugh he was trying very hard to suppress. "Your soldiers are watching," he said. "They're not my soldiers." "They are now." The days that followed were strange and golden and terrifying. Strange, because Aveline was suddenly in the middle of a border balance she had not anticipated. Evander, the Silver Wolf King, she was still getting used to that, had not come to the borderlands alone. He had, as it turned out, a network of scouts, informants, and strategically placed wolves throughout the unclaimed territory, and Thornwall Garrison was sitting at the center of it, like a pawn on a chessboard that had just been promoted to queen. Golden, because Evander was, there was no other word for it, magnificent. Not just physically, though that was undeniable. He was brilliant. He was strategic. He was the kind of leader who listened more than he spoke, and who treated every person in the garrison with the same careful respect, from Lyra to the youngest recruit. And when he looked at Aveline, which was often, his face did something that she suspected he was not aware of, something soft and stunned and so openly adoring that it made Petra weep into her breakfast. "It's not fair," Petra said, wiping her eyes. "He looks at her like that, and I'm supposed to just eat my oatmeal." "Eat your oatmeal, Petra," Nessa said dryly. Terrifying, because word was spreading. Merchants talked, soldiers talked. The story of the Blackmere Luna who had fled with the household ledgers and ended up in the arms of the Silver Wolf King was the kind of story that people could not resist telling. And they told it from the Crooked Antler to the northern border and back again, gaining embellishments with each retelling. By the time the story reached Ashenmore Keep, Aveline had apparently stolen not 42 but 400 wheels of cheese, seduced the Silver Wolf King with witchcraft, and was plotting to invade the northern territories with an army of enchanted wolves. The real story was more mundane and more wonderful. She was a quartermaster who was falling in love with a king who kept leaving flowers on her windowsill. The jealousy came next. Not from Evander, or rather from Evander, but not in any way that was hostile. It surfaced in small, precise, almost invisible ways that Aveline might not have noticed if she had not been paying very close attention. There was a merchant named Aldrich, tall, dark-haired 20-something, with the kind of easy charm that came from a lifetime of knowing he was good-looking and had excellent teeth. He came to Thornwall every 2 weeks to deliver dried goods, and he had, since Aveline's arrival, been flirting with her in the cheerful, harmless way of a young man who did not expect to get anywhere but enjoyed the journey. "Lady Ashwood," Aldrich said, sweeping into the supply room with his usual theatrical bow. "The most beautiful quartermaster in the Northern Territories. I've brought your salt, your tallow, and a poem I wrote about your eyes." "I don't need a poem about my eyes, Aldrich. I need 30 pounds of beeswax." "I can get you beeswax. I can get you anything. I once sourced a live peacock for a duke's wedding." "A peacock, Lady Ashwood. Have you ever tried to transport a live peacock? They scream. They scream like someone is murdering them, which is unfair because I was providing excellent accommodations." "The beeswax, Aldrich." "Right. Yes, beeswax. I'll have it next shipment. In the meantime..." He reached into his coat and produced a single red flower, slightly crushed from the journey. A humble token of my undying. Merchant. Aldrich turned. Evander was standing in the doorway of the supply room. He was leaning against the doorframe with his arms crossed, and his expression was perfectly, dangerously neutral. "Oh," Aldrich said. "Hello, are you the—" "I'm the man who is standing in this doorway," Evander said. "Watching you give my—" He stopped, corrected himself with visible effort. "Watching you give the quartermaster a crushed flower. It's not crushed, it's artfully wilted. It's dead. It's romantically distressed." Evander looked at the flower. He looked at Aldrich. He looked at Aveline. His expression did not change. It remained that perfect porcelain neutrality, but his left eye twitched exactly once, and Aveline, who had become an expert in the micro-expressions of the Silver Wolf King, recognized that twitch as the equivalent of a volcano politely clearing its throat. "Aldrich," Aveline said, taking the flower and setting it on the counter,